This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
A very good morning to you. It's 3 minutes after 10, and I thought in the spirit of my Catholic faith I'd begin with a confession this morning. I never really know what to do on days like today. I'm not stupid. There's a story about stupid people, actually, in the news today that I think we'll probably have to get our teeth into. Well, that's not fair. You can't say stupid. We'll just say perhaps the less intelligent among us feature in the Times. But I'm not stupid, and I do know I can do sums. I can understand basic arithmetic. But I don't have what you might call a fully integrated approach to fiscal events. I don't know whether you do. Do you have like an internal abacus in your head? So when they say we're going to increase the threshold at which you pay tax, or we're going to decrease the percentage of national insurance that you pay up to £50,000 on your earnings, do you have a fairly clear idea immediately of what that's going to mean to you? Or do you rely upon the media for it? Because we appear in this industry to like nothing more than provide hours and pages of analysis and explanation. Or do you, like me, find yourself letting it all sort of wash over you? And I don't mean that in a smug or insulated sense. Whatever my financial situation was, I think that I did just sort of let it all wash over me and wait and see, notice when the pay packet comes in, or notice when the bills come in, whether or not I can detect any meaningful change in my personal circumstances. And then I look at the politics. So £11 billion worth of tax breaks for business, which you sort of think that will be good if it is spent on investments. But we live in a country where giving cash to businesses has recently seemed to be just a roundabout way of giving cash to shareholders. Look at water companies. And so that's what I mean is I don't know. State pension going up by 8.5% as the triple lock is honoured in full looks very political, doesn't it? The last thing you want is people in the autumn of their years to be struggling unnecessarily. But equally, if everybody else is struggling, then how confident can we be that that is the correct place to focus attention or to focus finances? And then you've got that very tabloid-friendly threat to axe the benefits to get jobless back to work, a probably non-existent constituency of people. So here's what I think. I think they're going to go early for a general election. It's always been essentially a toss-up between May or October. Any later than October, and I think you run the risk of having it when the weather's awful, the evenings are drawing in ever earlier, the idea of schlepping your carcass down to the ballot box and sticking your cross on a piece of paper becomes less and less attractive. So I don't think it was ever going to be any later than October. I think technically they can go as late as January 2025. And there are two approaches to this. You either acknowledge things are highly unlikely to get meaningfully better, but they might. So Rishi Sunak could have adopted the Mr. Micawber approach to calling a general election. Mr. Micawber, one of Charles Dickens's most sympathetic and engaging characters, was renowned for his catchphrase, "Something will come up." Well, an eternal optimist, you might call him. However parlous and perilous his personal situation and his familial situation became, he was always confident that something will come up. And thankfully, it usually did. So Sunak will be thinking, if he was going down the Mr. Micawber route, something will come up. And therefore, we won't go yet on the general election. We'll call it at the last possible moment, because something will come up. My feeling is that yesterday that was abandoned finally. I'm sure it was probably abandoned a while ago, but I don't think that they're going to be backing a Mr. Micawber approach to the next general election anymore. So what's the alternative? The alternative is a sugar rush election. The alternative is an attempt to persuade people that the Tory party is doing them a favour, even as the Office of Budget Responsibility reports the biggest drop in our living standards in, well, pretty close, in fact, to living memory. Growth forecast slashed for the next 2 years, and living standards set to be hit very, very hard. So even against that backdrop, They can enlist their friends on Fleet Street. Daily Mail. Biggest tax cut since the 1980s. Let's hope it's just the start. And the Sun, even more pathetically, New Year's wahey. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt yesterday handed 27 million Brits a New Year national insurance tax cut. You're not going to be better off. And even the Times, which I'm afraid is a very tragic day for students of British journalism, even the Times now goes to places previously plumbed only by the Telegraph, the Mail and the Sun. Even the Times says Hunt eases tax burden, which I suppose you could claim is technically true in that they've dialed down slightly what was expected to happen according to previous budgets. But goodness me, it is, as the Office of Budget Responsibility points out, it is going to be tough. But it's a sugar rush. These are sugar rushes. The front page of the Sun newspaper today. And I think he even mentioned the Sun in the statement, didn't he? So it's not hard to identify precisely what constituency he's going for. And these, of course, are newspapers edited by people who are supremely comfortable lying to their own readers and treating their own readers like mugs. New Year's way! Biggest tax cut since the 80s. Hunt eases tax burden. I haven't even got the Telegraph in front of me, but oh yes, I have. Biggest tax cut since the 1980s. It's almost like they took dictation from the same source, isn't it? It's almost as if they've been given a steer from the same source. Remarkably, the Daily Telegraph also features 5 columnists on its front page. I'm just going to focus on 2 of them. These are the people who are going to provide you with the best comment and analysis. One of them is Alistair Heath, who described the catastrophic autumn statement of Kwasi Kwarteng and Liz Truss as the finest budget he'd ever seen in his life. He's still getting paid to offer up his thoughts on economic analysis, and you'll never guess in a million years who's sitting next to him on the front page of the Daily Telegraph today. Kwasi Kwarteng, the man who delivered the catastrophic autumn statement, almost immediately wiped £30 billion off our economy. Who better, you may wonder, to turn to for sage economic advice than a cheerleader and an architect of one of the most perilous moments in the fiscal history of these eyes? Just absolutely extraordinary. Ever I think I exaggerate how bonkers things have become, how broken Britain has become, to coin a phrase, I just turn to this newspaper, this former newspaper, and marvel at the depths of post-truth reporting that it now plumbs. So that's your sugar rush. Never mind the facts, feel the celebration. Jeremy Hunt sorted you right out. Biggest tax cut since the 80s. Tax burden is higher than it has ever been, but it's not quite as high as it might have been. So they're claiming that it's the biggest tax cut since the 1980s. And they are doing it in order to soften you up for a general election. And I don't want to have I don't want to have a specific phone in today. It's slightly thin ice, this. It doesn't always work. Oddly, you're a strange creature, you are. The more laser-like my focus is on a certain question, the better the calls are. You'd think, wouldn't you, that asking quite a vague and flabby question and then opening up the phone lines would be quite a good way of doing, but it's not, usually. And today we're going to provide an exception to that rule. I am going to ask you quite a vague and flabby question, but I am going to demand a very high caliber of contribution. So you are only allowed to ring in if you're clever. Okay? In the second hour, we're looking at reports that the less intelligent you are, the more likely you were to vote for Brexit. So I'm tempted possibly to insist in the second hour that you're only allowed to ring in if you're not clever. And we can examine what it was about you that made you more likely to vote for Brexit. It's not me that's saying this. It's not an opinion. It's counting. It's proper research, science, innit? But what do we think, genuinely, what do we think about the prospect of an election? The sooner he goes for it, Ollie in Oxford writes, the more chance he has of still being the leader when it actually happens. And that's all. I want to dedicate today's programme to Brenda in Bristol. Do you remember Brenda in Bristol? I should have thought of this sooner and we could have got the clip ready. Brenda in Bristol, when greeted with the news that a general election had been called, I think by Boris Johnson or Theresa May or one of them, it's so hard to keep up, responded with the immortal words, something like, oh no, not another one. Oh no, not another one. I'm going to dedicate today's programme to Brenda in Bristol. There's not actually a clear case for dedicating it to her because the election when it's called will be fairly close to the wire, as in fairly close to the last point at which it could be called. You're not looking at a 2019 scenario that came after 2017, much earlier than it needed to be. But Boris Johnson, for various reasons, keen to cement both his majority and his premiership. But for those of us who approach general elections with a curious mix of anticipation and dread, that's why today is the day that we remember Brenda in Bristol. And the question I have for you is this. What do you think the general election is going to be fought on? How do you think the general election is going to be fought? I've read some speculation today. I've read some analysis. The best for my money is probably, once again, actually, Aditya Chakraborty in The Guardian. But and some of the people that are paid for their punditry are obviously worth their wages. Others work for the Daily Telegraph. But I'm interested in yours. I think you've got as much of a guess as anybody else. You've got as much of a insight. So what do we think? So first of all, I'm right, aren't I? They've got to be softening us up for a spring general election. 0345 6060 973. The bigger question: what do you think? How are they going to fight this election? And I've tried recently to tempt Tories, traditional Tories, onto the programme a little more than I usually do, because not only do I think you're probably the loneliest people in British politics at the moment, but I genuinely think you're the most interesting. You know, the Conservative Party of Amber Rudd, or David Gauke, or Dominic Grieve, or even perhaps Ken Clarke. Who are you? Who speaks for you? How do you think this iteration of the Tory party is going to fight the next general election? With a little parenthetical side order of, it is going to be in the spring, isn't it? I haven't looked at the odds yet. I don't know what the numbers are. So how are they going to fight it? 0345 6060 973. How plausible is it that they haven't actually got a leg to stand on? This is it now. This sugar rush of almost mythical tax cuts. That's it. I mean, if I were a Tory, if I was supportive of the current shower, I'd probably be panicking. But if I was motivated more by a deep-rooted and carefully cultivated fear of the Labour Party, I don't know where I'd be today. I don't know what I'd be looking at. Rachel Reeves does not sound profoundly dissimilar in some areas to Jeremy Hunt. I think she's come on in leaps and bounds lately as a communicator, as a politician. But what on earth are the Tories, after 13 years of leadership, with the country in the doldrums, how are they going to fight a general election? What are they going to fight it on? And I'll take as imaginative an answer to that question as you want, really. 0345 6060 973. And then, of course, if you want, you can channel a bit of Brenda in Bristol and just tell me straight what you think about the prospect of a general election within the next 6 months. It's 1016. The number you need, as always, is 0345 6060 973.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
19 minutes after 10. I'm fascinated by intelligence. Quite often people who tell me that they're not very bright are very bright, and people who think that they are very bright aren't very bright. So John describes himself as not so clever in this text, but actually he makes a brilliant point that I've missed. All the way from the Isle of Coll. He says, can I throw the small boats into the mix? They've got to have an election before the summer when there will be an increase in small boats. I'm going to make another prediction. Khalid and Paul will be up first. There's a couple of phone lines free for you if you're quick. I'm going to make another prediction because the immigration figures are fascinating. They're huge, unprecedentedly large. There are a couple of anomalies, most obviously Hong Kong and Ukraine. But if you look at something as simple as the number of visas that are being issued for care workers, then you get an idea of why these numbers are so high and why talking about lowering them is a little bit disingenuous. So the right-wing newspapers weaponised immigration to get Brexit done. But when you've got Tories in power and it's on the Tories' watch that immigration is happening, the right-wing newspapers are in a bit of a bind because they kind of don't want the opposition to win. It's pretty clear that all of the newspapers that I've referred to this morning dedicated very much shoulders to the wheel now to help the Tories do as well as possible in the coming election, which means that they can't really be as vile on the immigration figure and the immigration issue as they were in the run-up to Brexit. So they wanted to get Brexit done, but keep the Tories in power. So you almost create the idea that immigration is a consequence of European Union membership. But we're not in the European Union anymore. And it's 600,000-700,000. I'll get you the exact numbers in a minute. So you can only lay that at the feet of the government, which is, of course, what your Faragist weirdos will do from the lunatic fringe of the lunatic fringe of the lunatic fringe of British politics. They'll just go for the nativist race baiting. But the papers can't do that because they want the Tories to do well in an election. So I think you're going to see probably quite a muted response to immigration. Not like quiet, but less than it would be until Labour win the election, at which point all bets are off and it becomes once again a rancid rhetorical device for right-wing media and, of course, right-wing politicians who will just ask you to ignore the 13, 14-year record of the Tories on this issue and focus instead upon what's happening under Labour. And when you see Geert Wilders getting the most votes in Austria, a politician who was rightly barred from coming into this country for his divisive and toxic rhetoric not that long ago, wouldn't be barred now. Suella Braverman would probably have him round for tea. You get reminded that the worst possible scenario for societies is economic crisis and refugee crisis, or economic crisis and far-right politicians demonising foreigners. So be careful. 10:22 is the time. Khalid is in Edmonton. What is the election going to be about, Khalid?
Morning, James. I find myself actually disagreeing with you once, actually, which is a rare occurrence. I believe they're going to go winter next year, and I'll tell you why. So I think they want one more budget. I get the feeling
there might be a budget in February.
That's one of the... Maybe one more autumn statement. I think there will be a big headline tax cut ahead of any election, with the battlegrounds being basically Tories. We're a low party. We're a low tax party. And Labour basically saying, well, you know, we're the party of public spending. I think public spending versus low tax is really where the grounds are lying. I think a lot of people are fed up with the NHS. You know, they're simply to the doctors and nurses, the railway workers, the teachers. Our public services are its knees, and I think that's really where the battleground will be lying. Do you want the spending
Dutch, Holland, not Austria? I don't know where I got that from. Sorry, Geert Wilders is in Holland, not in Austria. Carry on, Khalid.
Yeah, indeed, and I think a lot of people. The reason why they're frustrated with the Tories is not necessarily, you know, all the kind of the wokeism and all the kind of cultural wars that they're trying to stoke. It's really about the fact that people can't get a GP appointment. You know, the schools are a mess. You know, and the state of our public services is just like.
Hang on. So, in a way, you're presuming that Labour might be able to set the agenda for the next election rather than the Tories, because I mean, there's a £20 billion cut in public spending in yesterday's numbers.
Exactly.
So you're looking at the public services in this country today. The stuff you've just referred to, whether it's the NHS or whether it's policing or whatever it might be, whatever element of public service that you're looking at, and you're saying, we can easily slice another £20 billion. We can easily suck another £20 billion out of the marrow of our society. And the newspapers that they will rely on for the cheerleading in the run-up to the election are greeting it as a budget of genius. So I don't know, doesn't that undermine your analysis slightly, or does it undermine mine?
Well, if you remember, I mean, I think Rachel Reeves mentioned this in her comeback, where the Tories were increasing national insurance just 18 months ago, weren't they? They were committed to social care. What happened to social care? That went down.
Well, I think they got some breathing space. People understood that the bailouts or the support provided through COVID had to be repaid, and yesterday it suggested they were going to start pretending that it didn't.
Exactly, and I think that's the difficulty. My one worry is 97. If you remember, Labour promised to keep to the spending plans of the Tories in order to get elected.
Yes,
and for 2 years there was no spending. There was no real difference whether you had a Tory government or a Labour government, because Labour made that commitment because they wanted power after being in opposition for so long.
Do you think they'll do something similar? I mean, I
think they'll do something similar. If the Tories go on the ground of we are the party of low taxation, and this is what you get, Labour, Keir Starmer's going to have to really think about, doing something similar to get those floating voters on board. And what does that mean for our public services over the next few years?
It's quite chilling. I haven't heard anything in what you've said that makes me understand why you think it will be in October rather than in May.
I think just traditionally, colder weather, Labour voters. I mean, you have to factor in also the fact that there's voter registration this year, this time round, isn't there? So,
but that's again not. I mean, I'm looking at the sugar rush, not really delivered in the numbers yesterday, but certainly delivered on the front pages, and that sugar rush says to me sooner rather than later. So that's all. Yeah,
I think there's an extra sugar rush coming.
But that would be in February. That would be in February. One of my very clever colleagues, Connor, who I turn to at 10 to 10 many mornings and canvass his opinions before passing them off on the programme as my own. He's very much of the view, I think even to the point perhaps of placing a small wager, very much of the view that it's going to be May. And Aditya Chakraborty writing in The Guardian, the bottom line from that autumn statement, prepare for a general election in the spring. And what is it going to be fought on? And Khalid makes a great point. We'll claim to be the party of saving money and giving it back to you, so that makes you the tax cut party. But quite how anyone can look at the state of the nation and think, I know what we need. We need less public spending, less spending on infrastructure, less spending on public services, less spending on... And then, of course, if you replace the conversation about the NHS or the police force with a conversation about mythical benefit scroungers, then you can pass it off, can't you? Then you can get away with it. Thank you, Khalid. Rachel's in... How do I pronounce that, Rachel? Skurla. Where's it near?
It's between Hull and Beverley.
Fantastic. I love Beverley. My dad was on the Hull Daily Mail many, many moons ago. What made you pick up the phone this morning?
Well, I think I agree with you. I think there's a sugar rush, and I think it could even be as early as January, February. But probably May.
Yeah.
But the purpose of my call is with a little bit of context. I live with MS, and I've only in the recent years had to leave work because of living with MS.
Yes.
So, and I have social media, and I'm kind of known as a bit of a disability campaigner, I suppose, in the area.
Yes.
And I'm also a member of DPAC Sheffield,
right,
which is Disabled People Against Cuts. I 100% think it's the Tories particularly are fighting it on culture wars, and they've already started. From the point of view of benefits, I posted things yesterday on social media and came under full attack from the if you can post on social media, you can work type people.
Yeah.
And it's just they're just winding up the press to just come after us. I sort of said the 2019 election was won on racism, and yes. I still say that to a large degree. They've kind of gone off the asylum seeker part at the moment, but it will come back.
Yes.
And the same with trans people, and I'm so nervous of people like your far right politicians like Lee Anderson, and there's a queue of them now. They're sort of gathering speed, aren't they? And the Red Wall MPs, so to say, and they really scare me because of the things that they're allowed to say.
When we talk about culture wars, we talk about, I think, the idea of politicians not promising to make their supporters' lives better, but promising to make the lives of people they've persuaded their supporters to despise worse. So Labour then, under that reading, become the party that will be encouraging children to transition gender in kindergarten. They'll be the party handing out all our riches to refugees. They'll be the party that are allowing skivers and lead swingers to live lives of luxury sitting on their sofa while the rest of us go out and work. And if history has taught us anything, it's taught us that these claims don't have to be true to be effective. Why so pessimistic? Why not a little bit more optimism that the population is wising up to these tactics now? Regardless of your experiences on social media, most people know the difference between counting and a deliberately performative toxic opinion.
I would like to think so, but I think it's the I suppose it's like the situation with, I know one of the television programmes spoke to pensioners last night who were all over the moon because they got the triple lock. Yeah. And I'm not taking that away from pensioners at all, but that's kind of to me, that's the target area. That's one of Tory's target areas, because in my history, it's pensioners that vote Tory.
Well, of course it is. Yes.
Predominantly. So they will aim it at the people that they think they can pull in. I'm not convinced about Labour.
No, fair
and
enough.
I'm not convinced that they're going to be able to turn it. I don't think anybody's going to be able to turn it around, James, in the next 10 years anyway. I think it's going to take a very long time to turn around after what's happened with public services.
And public finances. The Resolution Foundation have put out some figures that are absolutely stunning. While we've been on air, looking at the impact on household income, disposable household income, and it paints this Parliament, the Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak period, which followed the Theresa May, Boris Johnson period. So you time a Parliament from a general election. So this is going back to December 2019. And it shows that there has never been a contraction in disposable income in the course of a Parliament before. So it is the first time in modern history that we will have seen quite such a big fall in living standards. And that contraction, according to these figures, according to this analysis, that will still be going on next year whenever the general election is called. So that adds actually to Rachel's pessimistic analysis. They can't actually fight it on the money, as Khalid argued, they were bound to. So if they're not going to fight it on living standards, they're going to fight it on blame. It's 10:32. Thomas Watts is here now with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
10:36 is the time. Mike, pure attack is the only option, James. They've got so little to boast about. It will simply be, at least we're not Labour. And you can remember the adverts with the deliberately chilling prospects. Ewan agrees it'll be fought on slagging off the other side instead of on what they can offer. Anthony in Reigate says, I believe the next election should be fought in a boxing ring, James, as Keir Starmer will have the height advantage and Rishi Sunak will finally understand what it's like to be on the receiving end of punching down. It's a little literal there, Anthony. There'll be a smear campaign, another Anthony, not in Reigate. Continuous front pages, just like the Curry Gate. And I think it will be fought on the whole idea of not changing parties and risking a whole host of changes, says Joe in Birmingham. Labour will represent the change and therefore the economy could tank. It'll be a better the devil you know sort of scenario, if that makes sense. It makes sense. I don't know that I agree. And Brandon keeps it simple. They're going to fix potholes, James. It will be the election of potholes, the pothole election. Tory voters... And that doesn't mean, that we're not mates, we're not friends, can't get on with each other. Tory voters looking at this and thinking, I know what we need to do. What on earth would you say? The net migration figures are in. It's even higher than was expected. It's up to 672,000 in the year to June. That is an increase of 65,000 from last year. These are the two highest ever figures on net migration. And remember that in 2016, everyone who voted to reduce migration knew exactly what they were voting for. It's very condescending to think otherwise. Typical metropolitan elite behaviour. Everyone knew exactly what they were voting for. So even though they said they were voting to reduce migration, they knew that in fact they were going to see increased... I mean, it's just bonkers, right? But how does it feed into a looming election? Paul is in Bellingham. Paul, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
I'd like to take issue with you on one thing. It wasn't stupid people that voted for Brexit. It was politically ignorant people.
The cleverer... You've jumped the gun here, Paul. You have jumped... Because this is our next topic, and I can tell you now... that among those Britons in the top 10% by a measure of cognitive performance, 73% voted Remain, and among those in the bottom 10%, only 40% did. So this is cognitive performance, not political indoctrination.
But I mean, it's things that people just don't, the misunderstanding of the great...
No, this is the next topic. Stop talking about the 11 o'clock in the 10 o'clock hour.
All right, okay. But I'll tell you what, they'll do what they'll do what they always do.
Go on.
They will have a simple campaign, like along the lines of get Brexit done.
Yes.
The Labour Party will over egg the pudding with their campaign, saying they're going to do so much and confuse people, and the simple message will get the one across, and it will be probably, stop the scroungers, be hard on prisoners.
I forgot about the prisoners. No one feels sorry for the prisoners. We'll be fine.
that's what. But lock up for more people.
Yes. But can they do this? Hang on a minute.
Hang on. On the can, I've got a very important point to make.
Go on,
remember.
Hang on, wait there. Everyone be quiet. Everyone be quiet. Paul's got a very important point to make.
Right. Remember, in the realms of cephology, to overturn a majority of 65 would be an exceptionally unusual event.
It's very true. It would be. I think we forget that a little, polls notwithstanding. Here's the thing that I find interesting, because your analysis, surely, with every passing year, the appeal to the old tricks that you describe loses its salience, because you can point at all of these things and claim that they're awful. But apart from possibly the bottom 10% of the cognitive performance population, you're going to say you've been in charge for 13 years. You've been in charge for 14 years. I mean, you might, let's even pretend you're right and the country has been crippled by people pretending to have long COVID or whatever it is, or prisoners. You have been in charge for 14 years. How can it possibly not be your fault?
They'll blame it on COVID. How could that be our fault? They'll blame it on Putin. And they'll say, look, the state of the country is not down to us. It's down to these unique events. And of course, they'll blame it, go back as far as when they took over and blame the Labour Party for the economic crash in the 2008, when they had to clean up the economy in 2008, which it wasn't. It was down to a bunch of merchant bankers.
Is that rhyming slang?
Well, right, exactly. Most appropriately, isn't it?
It was mortgages, subprime mortgages in America. It certainly wasn't the fault of Gordon Brown, which people like Greg What's-his-chops are still pretending now.
They still blame the Labour Party for that. When it was down to
but look at the poll. The people don't buy it. So here's the only thing that we can disagree on. You're probably right that they're going to do it. I think we disagree on how effective it would be, because I suffer. I suffer from being one of nature's eternal optimists, Paul.
Oh, I'm actually a door knocker. I'm a Labour Party member. I'm a door knocker. I go out campaigning for the Labour Party. But,
blimey, that's the definition of optimism.
But I'm telling you, that you have to tinge it with reality.
And do they say this to you on the doorstep? Do you deal with people who will be enraged, very deliberately and consciously enraged?
And there's a lot. What I'm dealing with a lot on the doorstep are people that are totally switched off from politics.
Yes,
saying I can't be bothered to vote, which is what they want as well.
Of course, it is.
14% of the possible electorate voted Tory. So we've got 14% of the electorate getting a 65 seat majority.
It was 80 at the time, wasn't it?
Right. And we've got it's a sickening state of to call ourselves a democratic country is a joke.
Well, I generally steer people away from the first past the post conversation, but I'm a bit frightened of you, so I'm not going to stick.
It's now Labour Party policy. It was passed at conference last year that we should have proportional representation. We must save this country by.
But then you end up with then you could end up with Geert Wilders being the leader of the biggest party, and the British Geert Wilders, Nigel Wilders.
That won't happen.
Well, you say
not in this country.
I love you, mate, because you've just give me the analysis of what we would describe perhaps as the unthinking rump of the electorate having far too much power, and then in the space of a single phone call, you've rejected the idea that having the unthinking rump of the electorate under a proportional representation system would actually deliver a far right majority or a far right biggest party.
It would never do that.
Well, that's me thinking I was the optimist.
A good 60% of the British electorate are sensible people, and if I had my way, I would have the Australian system as well, where voting or attendance at a polling booth is mandatory.
Yes, I quite like that as well, and it would address some of the problems you describe. What an amazing call. Thank you, Paul. It would address some of the problems you describe, which we'd file under lethargy. You can sort of... You can provoke political engagement. You can't force it or guarantee it. But just by definition, knowing that you have to vote would probably change the attitude slightly of someone, just recalibrate slightly the attitude of someone encountered on the doorsteps in Bellingham by Paul, who just says, oh, they're all as bad as each other, I can't be bothered. It's coming up to 10:45. How is it going to be fought? If I had to draw a rough consensus from the conversation that we've had thus far, it would be that they can't really go in on anything but so-called culture wars, with also probably inflated nonsense about the economy and legacy claims that Labour can't be trusted, all of which is polling appallingly for the Tories at the moment. It's a very interesting period of British political history that we are entering into. It's 10:45.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
I don't want to be that guy who starts the show with a confident analysis of the political environment, landscape, and then ends the same hour with a retraction of the confidence that he displayed at the beginning. Quite a few people are pointing out the Resolution Foundation's analysis of where the governing party currently sits at the point of calling an election. And it is true that there has never been an election called early when the governing party is behind in the polls. 1992, just a tad, perhaps, early. But so that we're back to the Mr. McCorber analysis, which is if we're behind in the polls, why would you call an election? Because something could come up. Something will come up. Things could get better. In fact, one might quote D. Ream at this point. Those great sages of political analysis, featuring Brian Cox on keyboards. D. Ream famously opined things can only get better. But that's not true. That's what I think that the people who are poo-pooing the predictions of a spring election are missing. If you were Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt, how much faith would you put in the prospect that things can only get better? Because things can get worse. Things can get worse. The immigration figures have come out the day after the autumn statement. So by definition, the Tory party is in a weaker position today than it was yesterday. Things have got worse, not better. The prospect of small boats in the summer being weaponised by people even further to the right than Suella Braverman returns come the summer, after the spring. I'm going to stick to my belief that they'll go in spring, because the historical tradition of never going early when you're so far behind misses the broader ebb and flow of political cycles. This is an exhausted parliament. This is an exhausted government. Think of how many leaders you've had since 2016. You've had David Cameron, Theresa May, Boris Johnson, Liz Truss. 5. You've had 5 different prime ministers. How many years back would you have to go for the previous 5? So if you take Cameron as 1 and May as 2, Johnson as 3, Truss as 4, Sunak as 5, then going backwards, you take Brown as 1, Blair as 2, Major as 3, Thatcher as 4. You're going back to Jimmy bloody Callaghan, aren't you? That's the 5. So 5 for 5. That's how chaotic everything is. So in that context, I don't think that the historical precedent arguments are as powerful as they would be in normal contexts. Luckily, there is a book available now in all good bookshops called How They Broke Britain by James O'Brien. And that demonstrates that it is perhaps wrong now to bring analyses based upon history and tradition and, crucially, on precedent into the uniquely corrupted ecosystem in which we now find ourselves. And Graham in Hailsham is only half joking when he says maybe another Falklands War. Because that 92 election there, which was called a little early, I beg your pardon, the 83 election, the Falklands War was pivotal to Margaret Thatcher's success in that election. So, that event, and it sounds brutal in the context of life and death and bloody war, but something will come up. There's always the possibility that something will come up. But apart from that, I wouldn't be clinging to that, I don't think, if I was Rishi Sunak or Jeremy Hunt. Not in this context, not right now. But I could be wrong. 10:52 is the time. Enzo is in Leigh-on-Sea. Enzo, what would you like to say?
Good morning.
Hello.
Speaking of precedent, you've just brought it up. I think in all these scenarios, or maybe save Corbyn May, the better speaker wins pretty much, I think, every time. I think whoever comes across in a debate format, in a speech format, they normally have the upper hand over their opponent. So? I think so. I think May and Corbyn was a bit close, but I think obviously Johnson, like him or loathe him, he's an incredible speaker. I think Cameron versus
Cameron Miliband. Are you sure Cameron was better than Miliband?
Oh, yeah. I think so. I think he's a smoother. He's a smoother operator, certainly versus Brown as well. Brown a little bit, lackluster maybe.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, this is a tragic analysis because you're talking about style trumping substance at every turn, aren't you?
And I think in a debate format, if a Sunak decides to play dirty, I'm not sure he's a great speaker, but I think Starmer doesn't deal well with what is a woman, And then in that scenario, Starmer, who's obviously Mr. Careful, I think you have to pick an analysis when you ask something.
Those sort of ludicrous questions ending up deciding who actually leads the country. But you're probably right. I think
it might come down to that, which is obviously not great. But I think a Sunak, if he does feel a little bit like harnessing the dark arts, can say something grimy. And I think what does Starmer say to that? Does he isolate? Which arm does he cut off?
And that will depend on how much of the agenda is set by right-wing media. And this is the great challenge, whether you're talking about Ed Miliband, Jeremy Corbyn or Keir Starmer. How much dancing will they do to the tune of institutions that are dedicated essentially to their destruction?
Yeah, maybe. I think that's probably, obviously they're all working within the framework of what everyone's talking about. But I think that Sunak probably could come across slightly more engaging than a Starmer.
I'm going to disagree with you. I'm going to disagree with you about that. I'm not going to say Starmer's better. I'm going to say that you can't put a cigarette paper between them. PMQs is very evenly balanced. And listen, I'm biased. I imagine I'm biased. I don't know how easy it is to be sure. But I find Sunak less and less impressive. I think that once petulance appears, once you get... I think petulance is like kryptonite for politicians. Corbyn, as soon as Corbyn's petulance appeared, it was impossible to cling on to the sort of messianic hopes that he inspired in some people. And Sunak's petulance has appeared now. He doesn't think that people... they shouldn't be. Why are you questioning me? No one's ever questioned me before. I've never had to account for. I've never had to explain myself. And there is a public school petulance there, which is built upon an idea that you never have to explain yourself. So I don't think. I mean, if you're right about what decides elections, I'm not sure that it is actually that bad a news for Keir Starmer. Slow and steady wins the race.
Sunak will be more comfortable with saying things that are absolutely explosive.
Yeah, or at least hiding behind the people who are saying it. And we've seen that with the promotion of 30p Lennox to Deputy Chair of the Conservative Party, despite routinely coming out with things that would have turned Margaret Thatcher's hair white in their obnoxiousness, while simultaneously delighting the Powellites. Enzo, thank you. I'm cracking on just so we can squeeze in one or two more calls. With Grant Shapps in charge of defence, says this texter, I'm not sure they'd want another Falklands. Good God, you have to laugh because the alternative is to claw your own eyes out in despair. Mark's in Mill Hill. Mark, what do you think?
Very quickly, I think we're ignoring one point, which is that Brexit Part 957 actually kicks off on the 31st of January 2024.
Yes.
With new import controls.
Yeah.
So
these are the ones that Jacob Rees-Mogg described as an act of self-harm when he was postponing them previously.
And you will want to get an election out of the way before that becomes an economic millstone around your neck.
That's really interesting.
And I would think, if I were the Conservatives and I was Machiavellian, I would go the Thursday before Easter, 28th of March. And I would do that for any number of reasons, not least of which is the fact that the student vote will be out of position. It won't be where it expects to be.
And they will be gaming stuff like this. What do you think it would be? So the rationale of getting in there before the latest ramifications of Brexit kick in and are fully understood. It's like they're becoming baked into trade before they've been baked into trade, and the consequences have been reported or understood. What would they be fighting it on? What would they be pointing at?
They'll fight it on sovereignty. For instance, the European Court of Human Rights overriding our sovereign parliament.
But it didn't happen, did it? I mean, this is. I mean, you might be right, but this is the post-truth thing that frightens me. Is that the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom, was at enormous pains last week to explain that the decision they handed down on Rwanda being unsafe was not a consequence exclusively of the European Convention of Human Rights.
But James, if you look at social media,
that's what people believe.
That it's what people believe from the front page.
It doesn't matter whether it's true
Daily
or not.
Mail or the Daily Express.
It's incredible, isn't it? They come out and start talking about foreign courts in the days after a judgment handed down by the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom. A foreign court hasn't got involved in this in the latest round of the attempts to get the Rwanda planes off the ground. But I can't argue with you when you say that people believe it, and we'll appeal to all the things that we were appealing to when we broke the country last time.
Yeah.
And then it almost inevitably, it's like we planned it, Mark. You turn your attention to the report in the Times today that the cleverer people are, the more likely they were to vote to stay in the European Union. I'm not comfortable with this story. You're probably not going to believe me, but my heart sinks when I read stuff like that. It really does. I don't think it does any good at all. But then again, there's a little mischievous part of me that finds it quite amusing. But Mark and I can talk there, relatively informed, and point out that people are believing things that are not true, and they are linked to a form of jingoism or exceptionalism, a belief that a law should be judged not according to how effective it is or how intelligent it is or how fair it is, but it should be judged according to whether it smells a bit French. Here's a law that smells a bit French, therefore we don't want it. And that probably will be a big part of the next election. Oh boy.
James O'Brien on LBC.
3 minutes after 11 is the time. Okay. The Emeritus Professor of Statistics at the Open University has said something that I want you to bear in mind before we have the conversation that we're going to have next. He says there is an obvious temptation to assume that the finding of an association between measures of cognitive ability and the way people voted means that having lower cognitive ability caused people to be more likely to vote Leave. And while this research doesn't rule that possibility out, it certainly can't establish that it's true. I think it's the old causation and correlation conundrum. So just because research undertaken at the University of Bath has shown that the cleverer people are, the more likely they were to vote to stay in the European Union, it cannot prove that the cleverness was the reason why they voted to stay in the European Union. That's right, isn't it? That's the difference between causation and correlation. I think you'd have to be quite bold to challenge that thesis, but it is only a thesis. It is not a scientifically proven fact. What is scientifically proven is the cleverer you are, the more likely you were to vote to remain in the European Union. And the less clever you are, the more likely you were to vote to leave. And some of the research undertaken here is absolutely extraordinary. They were particularly interested in married couples. Heterosexual married couples, 463 heterosexual married couples who had voted in different ways. I mean, that might be the topic for our conversation, actually. What that would be like when one partner voted Remain and one partner voted Leave. Because they've looked closely at the heterosexual married couples. And the Brexit voting half in these couples was, on average, the poorer cognitive performer. So if you... This is let's be responsible about it. God knows what question I'm going to ask you. 5 minutes after 11 is the time. So you take a married couple, one voted Remain, one voted Leave, and the statistics suggest that the one who voted to Remain is cleverer than the one who voted to Leave. And cognitive performance is not about education levels. It's not like a general knowledge test or a history test. It's like an IQ test, isn't it? It's a test that is designed to test your intelligence, your cognitive performance, your capacity for processing and understanding information. They then factored in other issues like income, education, and age. So they put in other variables on this, and it held true. It was still the case that people with higher cognitive function, regardless of other variables, were more likely to have voted to remain in the European Union. I don't know how helpful this is in the great scheme of things. I don't know why. Well, Chris Dawson, who did the research at the University of Bath, who the Times describe as a Remain voter, said people shouldn't get angry with this or joyful depending on who they voted for. This is about differences at a population level. But I think it's going to be very hard. I think it's going to be very hard not to get angry. If you voted Leave, then seeing a headline that says less intelligent people were more likely to back Brexit is going to make you cross, isn't it? Isn't it? And similarly, if you are, like me, a frustrated former Remainer who doesn't quite know how to process all of the evidence now that we were right about pretty much everything. Except, what did Farage say in the jungle the other night? Standing on our own 2 feet or something. Yeah, there you go. That's worth all the damage, all the harm. At least you got what you wanted on immigration. Oh, no, sorry. So you've got... I don't think there's much schadenfreude to be had in this. And in fact, if there's a danger of anything, there's a danger of it feeding into that false perception of smugness and condescension that is often laid at the feet of former Remainers. Dominic Raab was very good at that before his career exploded in a fireball of bullying allegations and weapons-grade incompetence. Dominic Raab used to say, people like James O'Brien think that all Leave voters are racist and thick, which is not true. I don't think that all Leave voters, I never did think. My catchphrase was always contempt for the con men like Raab and compassion for the conned, as in the people who thought that they were going to be better off living in a country with a better NHS and lower immigration. How's that working out for you? Now, who really thought you were stupid? The people who persuaded you to vote for something impossible, or the people who tried to explain to you why the thing that you were voting for was impossible? Who thought you were stupid? The people who thought that, yeah, exactly. So James suggests the phoning topic we're looking for is your spouse a dummy? 0345 6060 973. I told you the morning before the referendum that if you were confused about what to do, then just ask the cleverest person you know. And I realised on the way home that certainly one of the cleverest people I know was definitely going to vote Leave, because he's the son of one of the most prominent and Eurosceptic politicians of the last 50 years, and he happens to be one of my closest friends. So even my little theory of asking the cleverest person you know what they're going to do and then do it, what I should have done is ask the stupidest person you know what they're going to do and then do the opposite. Would that have worked? If you'd asked the stupidest person, I'm just trying to think about the presenting lineup at LBC at the time. If I'd asked the stupidest person on the presenting roster at LBC how they were going to vote in the referendum and then done the opposite, how would I have ended up voting? Leave or Remain? Probably Remain, I think. Don't you? I don't. I mean, you know, the world has turned a lot since then. We've got quite a different roster, different personnel. But that might have worked. Instead of telling you to ask the clever, but then we come back to the fact that the Remain voting partner was more likely to do better on cognitive tests. So why? This is not. I like this, David. I voted to Remain and my wife voted to Leave. She's far brighter than me, but she followed her Daily Mail reading parents. And sadly, they are no longer with us. Again, I've got no beef with her, David. I'm sure you haven't either. Just the idea that, you grow up, your parents, you trust your parents. They tell you that something is true. You believe that it's true. And then they prove it by showing you their newspaper. And therefore you vote to become the first population in history to impose economic sanctions on itself because you have been persuaded that it would somehow be a good idea. 10 minutes after 11 is the time. I want you to talk to me about why. That's all. So you can't argue with the statistics. You can't argue with the findings. But you can argue about why this might be. Well, why would it have been more appealing to somebody a bit slower intellectually? Why? Because it doesn't necessarily follow, does it? Why would it be the case that the cleverer you are, the less likely you were to vote Brexit? Just why? And I don't actually want. I think that the temptation to use this as a camouflage for some unpleasantness or some teasing, mild bullying, I think I would have probably found that hard to resist in 2017. But it's a bit pointless now, isn't it? I mean, I'm very much of the view that we've all lost now. We can see that everybody lost in 2016. Nobody won anything. And that's from a patriotic perspective, that's a national tragedy. That's a national tragedy. the questions of how it happened remain interesting, particularly when you couch it in that language of becoming the first population in history to actually vote to impose economic sanctions on itself. It is something that many people in many other countries around the world find absolutely impossible to process. How could you possibly have become and you need to understand all sorts of things. You need to understand the right-wing media. You need to understand the sulphurous appeal of rhetoric like Nigel Farage's, the demonisation of all foreigners, not just recent arrivals in these lands. You need to understand the desperation of David Cameron. You need to understand the failure of the opposition parties, particularly the Labour Party, to offer up meaningful resistance, and the failure of both major leaders of the Conservative and the Labour Party in 2016 to campaign effectively and or together for the national interest. There are a million reasons why it happened. And this is perhaps just one of them. 3,183 couples, including 463 heterosexual married couples who had voted in different ways. And the conclusion of the research is that if you are cleverer, then you are more likely to have voted to remain. And if you are less clever, if you are less intelligent, it's the headline in the Times, less intelligent, more likely to back Brexit. And I want to know why you think that might be. Because you can't prove causation. You can only prove correlation. So why do you think that might be? And I'm not being facetious, actually, or disingenuous when I say don't be mean. All right? And if you can talk to me from the perspective of a couple, you're a member of a couple that voted differently, how do you greet this report? So you voted Remain and your husband voted Leave. The statistics suggest that means he's not as clever as you. How do you greet this report? 0345 60 60973. And, of course, the other way around. You voted to Leave and your husband voted to Remain. How do you greet the news today that you are probably less intelligent than him? And why do you think there appears to be a relationship between intelligence, or rather lack of intelligence, and support for Brexit? 0345 60 60973 is the number you need.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
11:17 is the time. It is, and it's an arresting headline, but it's actually not a very happy one, regardless of how you feel about Brexit. This headline is, less intelligent were more likely to back Brexit. It doesn't help anything, really, does it? But it does beg a rather big and important question. Why might that be? Andy in Hampton Court points out that Ricky Gervais knew this a while ago without needing a university study. He suggested that in terms of asking the public to decide on important things, the fact that we had to take the do not drink warning off bottles of bleach was pertinent. Wait a couple of years and then have a referendum. Brian's in Cheshire. Brian, what do you think is going on here?
Well, it was. They made it a binary decision, but it wasn't a binary decision. It wasn't a yes or no. For instance, I was never going to be in favour of joining the euro in the state of our economy. I think Blair's sort of...
But no one was ever talking about that.
No, exactly. Yeah. I mean, it was all about immigration. And actually, there was a little bit of an error, I think, in inverted commas, free movement of people because there was free movement of capital. The point is, I think a lot of these were nuanced decisions. And if you're intelligent, you're probably more likely to understand that. And if you're not, I think if you ask the average person about the single market, I think they asked Boris Johnson about the single market, and he didn't understand what the hell it was.
Nadine Dorries had to ask her WhatsApp mate what the customs union was because she kept losing arguments about why it was important to leave it.
Yeah, and also it was. But
most people who voted Remain would have struggled to tell you exactly certainly what the difference between the single market and the customs union was. Yeah. But they would have understood frictionless trade was in place and it was unlikely to persist afterwards, probably.
Yeah, I think a lot of people did understand that that Thatcher had been a big supporter of the single market, and
but this is knowledge, mate. This is knowledge, not intelligence. I think we're confusing knowledge with intelligence.
Well, I think people have made almost like if you've gathered knowledge, then that helps you with your intelligence.
Well,
and if you're intelligent,
true.
you gather knowledge, don't you? What have you?
Yes.
It's the flip side of the same coin. That if people just go home, watch the soaps, go to work, there's nothing wrong with that. But then if you ask them to make a very complicated political economic decision, you might fall a little bit short.
This is where Dominic Cummings' deployment of Facebook in the final weekend becomes really pertinent, because sending messages to your Auntie Doris telling her that if she votes Leave, she can have a new hip is just very simple.
£350 million a week. A very simple but stupid and idiotic sort of thing, and people who aren't that bothered about politics, aren't bothered about self-selection. Me phoning you today, then they're going to vote. They're going to vote. They're going to vote on very simple things.
Could the Remain campaign have capitalised on it from the other angle? Could they have offered up more atavistic rallying points?
Why didn't they just say, look, if you work in this company, your job will be at risk?
Project Fear, though.
Sorry?
Project Fear, mate.
Say that again?
Project Fear.
Yeah. Well, I think, unfortunately, at that atavistic level, that's what works.
So every time I point out something, or even if I try and appeal to your baser instincts by making you feel threatened by the prospect of leaving, the people on the other side just shout Project Fear a bit louder.
Well, okay, but then, so it was easier, overall, it was easier to do the Johnny Foreigner bit, which was a very large element of it, and is always a large element of it when you're making decisions like that. If you want it to go in a sort of nationalistic...
and do you think cognitive function comes into that? Because there's plenty of very well-educated racists out there.
Yeah, but I think on average, and we're talking about average, aren't we? We're not saying that every person who voted Leave was an idiot.
No, quite the opposite.
Every person who voted Remain was a professor.
No, that's categorically not the case.
We're sort of saying that on balance, most people who probably made more of a nuanced decision to stay in than to leave. And actually, a lot of people might have done it. Remainers might have gone, well, I know that I can walk through the passport.
And better the devil you know. So your relationship with change, which has nothing to do with your cognitive function. Martin Lewis explained this brilliantly. A risk he talked about rather necessarily than change. But, a lot of it will be informed by how comfortable you are with risk, because it's a bigger risk to leave than it is to remain. But that could have been, of course, informed by satisfaction or dissatisfaction with the status quo. So the less you felt you had to lose, the more tempted you would be to take a risk. And I don't think that's got anything to do with cognitive function, which is why I stress, and I will continue to stress, that this is fascinating. But it is not a cause for either celebration or commiseration. As the man behind the research said, people should not get angry with this or joyful, depending on who they voted for. Although Dougie adds, I'm listening to this with an incredulous look on my face, wondering whether anyone really needed a university-backed study to figure out the bleeding obvious. Listen, the thing about academia is the quality of the research, the questions that are asked, and the way that the research is conducted. So there's something, Dougie, there's something unhelpful. I'm sounding like a teacher now. I want you to have a good, long, hard think about yourself, Dougie, because if they do some qualitative research, they do some good research, and the conclusion of that research tallies with what you expected the conclusion to be, it doesn't make the research a waste of time. In many ways, it becomes the polar opposite. It's trying to make sense of things that are true, not just to discover things that are true. So there's a little bit in the new book about a researcher at the University of Warwick, actually, looking at the impact of austerity on the likelihood of someone changing their voting intentions towards UKIP. And the harder they were hit by austerity, the more likely they were to consider voting for UKIP. So not only does that portray David Cameron as being a secret weapon of the Leave campaign, but it also walks the tightrope between causation and correlation, because you can't categorically prove that the reason they were more drawn towards UKIP was because they'd been hit harder by austerity, but there's a very strong sense that it probably played a part. And that research might tally with what you thought was the case. You might have thought it was bleeding obvious that austerity drove the Leave vote, because, as I said a minute ago, the less you've got to lose, the more likely you are to take a risk or to vote for a change without even knowing what it was. So you might think it's obvious, but someone taking the time to ask the right questions of a representative portion of the population coming back with conclusions that are intriguing and interesting, that doesn't make the research... Sorry, Dougie, you weren't expecting the Spanish Inquisition, were you? But I just, it got on my nerves slightly when a colleague picked up on this research and pointed out how interesting it was. And some people responded by saying, oh, bloody centrists. Oh, they're so surprised by it. And you're not surprised by the conclusion of the research. You're impressed by the quality of the research. So that's a really good example of people who think they're clever actually being too thick to understand what's going on in a conversation that they're criticising. And I know you weren't doing that, Dougie, but just because the conclusion comes out in agreement with what you expected doesn't in any way undermine the importance and the validity of the research that delivered the conclusion. It's 11:25. Joe's in Bath. Joe, what would you like to say?
Hello, my name's actually Larissa.
Oh. Why did you tell the producer it was Joe?
I didn't. I told him that the last time I rang and I needed to ring anonymously, I gave a different name. And I just said to him, my name isn't Joe, it's actually Larissa, because I want my name
to be... It's all right, there's a glitch on the computer. They couldn't change your name from that time you rang in when you pretended to be somebody else.
It doesn't matter, that's quite all right. Anyway, the point is...
Yes.
Rather like you, the most intelligent person I know voted to leave.
Yes. I didn't say he was the most intelligent. I just said he was one of my cleverest friends.
Okay. Yeah. Well... The most intelligent person I know, who actually won the Mystery Hour board game on your programme a few weeks ago.
That's a high mark of intelligence. I think we can all agree.
Exactly. She voted to leave, and she voted to leave because she was very concerned about the bubbling up of the far right across Europe.
Yes.
And today's election results in the Netherlands is a good indicator of the sort of thing that she was concerned about.
Well, yeah, but so is Suella Braverman being Home Secretary until last week. So I don't know that it necessarily makes a vote to leave the European Union the right thing to have done in retrospect.
But that was her motive.
No, that's fine. But that's not. We're not relitigating Brexit. We're looking at why there might be a relationship between intelligence and vote and Brexit vote.
What concerns me about this research, I see on social media regularly statements like, these people are so stupid they shouldn't have the vote. And what worries me about research like this, as well intended as it might be, is that it begins to pave the way for introducing new bars to the franchise.
I don't think it does, but I understand your concern, because you've got people on the other side saying, if you love the EU so much, why don't you move there? To which you respond by saying, God, you really are stupid. You abolished my freedom of movement.
Yeah. But this concerns me. There is a kind of a feeling in the kind of lay political discourse that there should be some sort of cognitive bar or cognitive level that you have to pass in order to be able to have the vote. Now, I read something very interesting, or I heard it on a podcast recently, that one of the reasons in the early 20th century for the massive investment in adult education in Britain was that British governments were very concerned about the rise of populist politicians in Europe. You know, they saw what was happening, and they recognised that educating the electorate gave the electorate the capacity for critical thinking and for making their own judgments and their own decisions about who was presented to them to vote for. So there is really interesting stuff here around intelligence and the franchise.
Yes, there is. And you're right. There is a sort of sense of flirtation with eugenics almost here.
Exactly.
Yes.
Because it really frightens me.
But I know we can trust each other. I think we're conducting the conversation in a suitably responsible way.
Yeah. I just really worry that this idea that there need to be more barriers to voting...
Yes.
That concerns me.
No, and I understand why, although I'm certainly not suggesting that for a minute, and neither is the research, the study called Understanding Society, which is what the research, the name of the study in which this research has been published at the University of Bath. But you make a very, very valid point, and, you know, I don't know what the word for that is, really. I don't like the word eugenics, but the idea that you would have some form of intelligence test before people were allowed to cast a vote would be a profound undermining of democracy. And don't forget, and Larissa will appreciate this, but I sometimes need to remind myself, progress is still relatively recent. You know, extending the franchise to women, extending the franchise to the working class. These are wins. These are not inevitable evolutions of society. These are wins by the kind of people who at the time would have been demonized like Just Stop Oil protesters are demonized now. These are hard-won battles undertaken by people determined to break the status quo. And so they can go back again. So, yes, the preciousness of the vote must overshadow any conversations or research about the relationship between intelligence and deciding how to cast it. 11:30 is the time. Thomas Watts has your headline.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 11:34. Mystery Hour on the way at 12. Before that, we'll catch up with events this week, or certainly in the last couple of days, at the COVID inquiry. I think there's one interesting element. Well, there's several interesting elements of it, but Sunak's claims that the Eat Out to Help Out scheme was scientifically cleared with the scientists, discussed even with the scientists, seems to have fallen apart. Again, you know, if we lived in a normal country, then that would be quite a big deal. For the current Prime Minister to have potentially misled the population about the scientific advice that he had taken before deciding to get us all into Nando's in the middle of a global pandemic. But we don't live in a normal country, so we'll have to wait and see what happens with that story. We'll find out a little bit more about it later. What I really want to do is to speak to someone who voted to leave the European Union about why you think there is a relationship between intelligence or lack of intelligence and the vote that you cast. But I don't want to have a fight with you or make you feel bad. I hope that you don't feel, well, you feel a bit bad, really, because it's damaged all of us. But, I don't have particular beef with you because of the effort that was put into persuading you to vote in the way that you did. I don't think I'm going to get coupled. Are you going to call me? If you're still together, I suppose if you've broken up, you might want to tell me what you think is going on here. But isn't it fascinating, of the 463 heterosexual married couples who voted different ways in the referendum, the Brexit voting half was on average the poorer cognitive performer. Why would that be? 0345 6060 973. Why is that more interesting than the rest of the research? Because you're likely to be exposed to the same external stimuli and influences. If you're a married couple, you're more likely to be exposed to the same media as each other, for example, or you're party to the same conversations, you're accessing the same information and yet arriving at two very different conclusions on this kind of issue. I love it. I just find it really interesting. 11:36 is the time. Richard is in Woolwich. Richard, what would you like to say?
Oh, good morning, James. James, I'd like to kind of just expand the idea of intelligence. So, of course, the study is about cognitive intelligence. I understand that, and that's IQ and the rest. But, of course, there is multiple intelligence. There's things like social intelligence, for example. And in all the studies I've done and the assessments, I have quite high social intelligence, right. And I voted to remain. And when I think about that, and I have a lot of friends who have high social intelligence who also voted to remain, and therefore I see the correlation more around saying that people who are really relaxed about multiple identities. So I'm really relaxed. I'm English, I'm British, I was European, I'm Commonwealth, and I'm really relaxed about that. And I'm also really relaxed about collective decision making. Yeah, and I have no fear of it. So my understanding of everybody I know that voted to remain have high social intelligence.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's even helpful to call it social intelligence, actually, just from a point of view of making other people feel bad, even if it's technically accurate. I love the word relaxed, actually. I think that did more lifting than the social intelligence line. It's just I'm relaxed because probably the average Leave voter would find it a lot easier to admit to being unrelaxed about the things you've described than unintelligent.
I agree with you. There is, but it was quite. It is curious. All the kind of the Brexiters I kind of knew, and some of them whom are now we're no longer mates as they were.
Really, you fell out over this, or?
Oh God, yeah.
It does happen.
And by the way, in all those, I used to live in Hungary, and in all those long years, you were the go-to person for me.
Well, I hope you're not blaming me for the failure of your friendships.
No, I'm certainly not. But I just find it fascinating that this kind of sense of, as you say, being comfortable about having all this kind of multiple noise going on, for me, is a really important factor here, as opposed to cognitive intelligence. And I felt, and with the Brexit, what I felt was this kind of, the relationship I had was this kind of entrenched, very hard, very dogmatic, very fearful view of otherness, which I didn't get in with my Remain friends, who had high social intelligence.
Yes, I wonder how that applies to sort of spectator columnists who are clearly not stupid people, but who are supremely unrelaxed about the other issues you've described. You perhaps would posit that they might not have high social intelligence.
Well, I would posit that they're just trying to sell columns.
Well, there is that as well, but some of them seem to believe it. It's always hard to tell which ones. But yeah, so the distinctions of different types of intelligence, I suppose, work. But none of this is very comfortable listening for people who voted to leave, albeit that these are averages. And as I stressed from the beginning, I know certainly intelligent, highly intelligent people who also, for the record, I would describe as socially intelligent as well, supremely relaxed about. In fact, one of my leave voting friends lives in the Canary Islands. But it's a long story. But yeah, it remains uncomfortable listening. The temptation to assume an association between measures of cognitive ability and the way people voted is going to be very high for frustrated Remainers. And is there any other kind of former Remainer than the frustrated kind? Thank you, Richard. Thank you for the kind words. Adam's in Nottingham. Adam, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Good to speak to you again. I voted Remain. I think we've spoken about it a number of times. So that's what I think. I have an overall sort of a bad feeling about sort of trying to link intelligence with Brexit, Brexiters. And the ultimate thing is really, I think you nailed it earlier, and it was really around, causation and correlation. And one of the things which I've always sort of looked at since the Brexit vote were almost, shall we sort of say, the demographics. So ultimately, the primary demographic was age. Yeah,
but they played that. They've done that. They took into account factors such as income, education, and age.
But the ultimate thing is, I'm still. This is where my ultimate beef is. Sometimes there is, if you imagine a Venn diagram, we're looking at things such as sort of two separate sets. So age and education. However, if we sort of look at the changes in the UK over maybe the last sort of 20, 30 years, particularly when it came to higher education, in particularly the number of people who have been university educated, between the 20 and 40s, it's far higher than in terms of a population from our, say, 55 to 65s. Alternatively, those who left at 16 or 18.
You're not wrong in what you're saying, but you are wrong in what you're reading into it, because this research categorically adjusted for age and for education. So, even taking into account those factors, the conclusion is that the lower cognitive function is allied with a higher likelihood to vote Brexit. Even with the things you've described. So I think, like you, I want to believe that because it's brutal, right? This conclusion. If you're going to marry it, and of course it involves making that leap from correlation to causation, but it's hard not to, because I can't think what else the explanation would be.
Yeah, well,
you're a nice man. You're a nice man, and you're trying to give a break to people who voted to make us all poorer.
I find that totally unforgivable.
And to abolish our freedom. That's the problem with us bloody Remainers, is we're too nice. Yeah. So here's some chummo over there who abolished your freedom of movement, took away your economic prosperity, turned you into the first population in history to impose sanctions on itself. And here's you and me trying to say, don't feel too bad about yourself. I'm sure you're not stupid.
Yeah, as I say, I can't.
That's the curse of the Remainer, you see. And then he'll accuse you of thinking that he's racist. You can't win. Welcome to my world.
Oh, you can't.
You can't. Thank you, Adam. Always a pleasure. James is in Bedford. James, what would you like to say?
I think if it's not a little bit unfair to...
Profoundly unfair. Desperately unfair. Yeah.
Well, it's a little unfair, I think, to say that maybe Leavers weren't that intelligent. My member of the Leave versus Remain campaign, the Remain campaign was mainly focusing on facts and figures and numbers,
yes.
Whereas Leave was really focusing on more of an emotive thing. Like they were talking about independence, sovereignty, hope.
Not really. Not. They did after they won, and everyone started asking them about the numbers and the facts and the costs of food coming down and the £350 million a week for the NHS. It's only after they won and people started asking them questions about the facts that they'd claimed that they then started talking about the more nebulous things like sovereignty. I mean, even the Google search statistics on the word sovereignty are fascinating. So I challenge your memory on that one, James.
My memory might be a little bit bad. His was a few years ago, to be fair.
Yes.
I remember Boris Johnson standing up on the stage saying that, the campaign are talking about Sturge and whatever, and we're talking about hope, and I've seen Reform UK push that sort of thing on their socials.
Now, yes, but not before the referendum, oddly. Before the referendum, they were insisting on measurable improvements in our lives. Your life will be better if there are fewer immigrants. Your life will be better if we don't have to obey these laws. These laws are holding us back. Brussels is dedicated to the detriment of the United Kingdom. We must free ourselves from those shackles to be better off. And then it happened and we said, when are we going to be better off? And they said, well, you're not, but you've got all that sovereignty. You've got all the sovereignty you can eat. You say, what sovereignty? You say, don't ask difficult questions.
Well, this kind of completely undermines the defence that I was going to try.
It's like the good old days. Well, yeah, well, it doesn't completely undermine it.
I mean, basically, the point I was going to try and make was that somebody who's kind of more interested in facts and figures and numbers might do better on an intelligence test.
Maybe.
So,
well, hang on. Let's do it the other way around. I'll meet you in the middle and say that if you were of slightly lower cognitive function, then when you turn up to the person that sold you Brexit and say, when do I get the benefits? And they say, oh, you've already got them. It's all the sovereignty. You might be more likely to go, oh, okay, thank you very much.
I guess I can't really argue against that. Like I said, you kind of undermine my argument by pointing out, well, facts and memory.
Thank you, James. It's 11:46.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
How thick is your spouse? We should have done that, phone. I'm too nice sometimes. I'm bending over backwards, and Adam as well, but we're all bending over backwards to accommodate the desperate mistakes people made when they voted for Brexit. And as we discover that, in fact, cognitive function appears to be allied with how you voted in 2016, and married couples who voted differently show that the cleverer partner is the one that would have voted to remain. Maybe we should have just done that. How thick is your spouse? Would that have, maybe that would have been a bit inflammatory. I could probably get lumbered with divorce legal bills. It's 10 to 12. We may have time for some more calls on this. We may not. It depends whether Helen Hodinott bombards us with information and intrigue with her latest update on what's been going on at the COVID-19 inquiry.
Yes, OK. So yesterday, just to bring us up to speed, we had Sir Chris Whitty, the government's chief medical officer, giving evidence for the second day. Of course, on Tuesday, we finally got a tiny glimmer of what he thought of Boris Johnson's leadership by saying that he thinks he had a unique way of making decisions. He also said that he thought the UK was too slow to go into the first lockdown. And then yesterday, there was a big focus on herd immunity, an idea which at one point was being quite widely talked about by ministers and commentators, giving it a sheen of legitimacy, leading to some people assuming that it was a government policy. So Chris told the inquiry about his efforts to try to contain that impression.
This is one of those debates I tried to largely stay out of, but I wanted to do three things. Firstly, for the small number of people who actually thought this was a good idea initially, entirely based on the fact they hadn't understood it, I tried to make sure they did understand it and to realise that the implications of this were not what they thought it was. Secondly, I tried to encourage people not to try and discuss what I thought was a very complex issue, because immunity is, we've just scratched on the surface. Actually, we could have had an hour and a half on this and we'd still be going on how immunity and how it accrues. It's a very complex area of policy. So I tried to discourage this. And thirdly, whenever asked, I stated, because it was true, that this was never a policy of government. Our aim was to get R below 1, therefore to reduce the number of people infected rightly. That was the correct policy response. And by definition, that's going the opposite way to achieving herd immunity. So in a sense, our policy was the exact opposite of one of trying to encourage infection, which I thought was a foolish approach to take.
He's such a measured man, isn't he? He's very diplomatic, but you can sense there his frustration with the people who were wanging on about herd immunity and even publishing declarations and all sorts of nonsense and gibberish. I like Chris Whitty.
Absolutely. You do have to kind of read between the lines of what he's saying to get the true sense of his feeling. So after he was finished yesterday, up next was Jonathan Van Tam, who was England's Deputy Chief Medical Officer during the pandemic. And a lot of people remember him quite fondly for his extensive use of football analogies during the COVID press briefings. And he actually used one yesterday to describe the differences between his and Chris Whitty's working styles. He said that he's the one who chases the ball, while Sir Chris looks at it first and then makes a thoughtful, informed decision about whether it's worth chasing. But there were plenty of sobering parts to his evidence yesterday. He revealed shocking messages that were sent to his family. He said they were threatened with having their throats cut over his response to the pandemic. And he said it makes him really worried that that sort of treatment of public-facing figures during times of national emergencies will put people off wanting to do those vital roles in the future. And then in terms of the government's handling of the pandemic, the really key part of Sir Jonathan's evidence yesterday was about when he says he heard about Eat Out to Help Out. And his account tallies with Sir Patrick Valance's and Sir Chris Whitty's. He was asked by the counsel to the inquiry, Hugo Keith, KC, whether he was consulted about the scheme.
Absolutely not. The first I heard about it was Think on the TV.
I think that indicates what view you would have taken had you been consulted.
Had I been consulted, I wouldn't have made any distinction between Eat Out to Help Out and any other epidemiological event that brought different households into close contact with each other for the purposes of socialising, eating and consuming alcohol. The net epidemiological effect, is kind of agnostic to what's on the menu, as it were. But I would have said this is exactly encouraging what we've been trying to suppress and get on top of in the last few months. So it didn't feel sensible to me.
It didn't feel sensible to me. So that's Valance, Whitty and Van Tam. Sounds like an action movie. All adamant that they were not consulted on the Eat Out to Help Out scheme that Rishi Sunak launched.
Absolutely. That's 3 for 3.
OK, well, this is very awkward then.
Mr. Speaker, as he knows, there is an ongoing statutory inquiry into COVID. It's absolutely right that process is followed. I look forward to providing my own evidence in the coming weeks and addressing all these questions. But it was the case that the government took advice from scientific advisors. And again, that's exactly what this inquiry will go over.
Was that specific to Eat Out to Help Out? It was specifically asked about Eat Out to Help Out and specifically stated in the House of Commons that he had taken scientific advice, and yet the 3 key scientific advisors have all said in the space of this week, well, he didn't ask me, Gov.
And you start to get a picture of this kind of ripple of disbelief that spread among those experts as they heard about the scheme. They say, as it was announced, obviously Rishi Sunak says that they were consulted on it.
And Dame Angela McLean has been giving evidence as well. She, of course, I think is the one who gave Rishi Sunak the nickname Dr. Death, although we only found out about that relatively recently.
Yeah, so that came out in the last sitting that she did in the inquiry. And today she has been giving more evidence. So she called Rishi Sunak, Dr. Death, in a note that she sent during a crisis meeting that was convened to discuss Eat Out to Help Out. She sat on Sage during the pandemic. And today, she hasn't been talking about that so much. She's been talking about the outbreak of COVID in care homes. She says that was foreseeable. She has criticised the speed of the decision-making in government, saying it was the UK's most significant pandemic shortcoming. And she echoed Chris Whitty's comments earlier this week by saying she also thinks the first lockdown should have come sooner.
So if we're doing a with benefit of hindsight exercise here, I would say it should have been 2 weeks earlier. That would have made a really huge difference. Now, we didn't have the data 2 weeks earlier, so by the 16th we had enough data. In my opinion, we should have gone into lockdown. Given what we knew about how fast this epidemic was spreading, given what we knew and could surmise about the fact that there seemed that probably everybody could catch it. I mean, probably everybody was susceptible to catch it. I think there was enough information on that date to say we need to stop all non-essential contact.
Well, curiouser and curiouser. So I suppose somebody somewhere is going to have to ask Rishi Sunak which scientists it was that he took the advice from, because it wasn't any of the household name scientists who we have been hearing evidence from this week.
No, and he will appear in the coming weeks. Not next week. It's another blockbuster
Hancock's
week,
in
though.
next week, I think.
Matt Hancock, Dominic Raab, Michael Gove, they're all scheduled to give their evidence. And on Monday, it'll kick off with London Mayor Sadiq Khan and Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham.
Do you think, Helen, that there are some scientists, but they go to a different school?
We'll have to ask him in the inquiry. We'll wait and see what he says.
And I think we can probably rely on Hugo Keith to open that door. Helen Hoddinott, many thanks indeed. John in Bromley's been in touch in response to the conversation that we've been having about the apparent relationship between cognitive function and voting for Brexit. John writes, well, will that boring dope O'Brien ever stop going on about Brexit? He needs to shut up. From John in Bromley. And you've been in touch again to say, O'Brien comes on at 10, time to turn radio off and put CD on, wrote John in Bromley at 11:56 during a conversation about whether or not there might be a relationship between cognitive function and support for leaving the European Union. I'm not making any comments on that. I'm not I'm not inferring anything from those details, but I'm telling you this, it's Thursday, it's nearly 12 noon, it is time for Mystery Hour, your weekly opportunity to achieve the sort of satisfaction not ordinarily available anywhere else on your radio dial. And guess what? This only holds true for about 43 seconds, but if you hit the numbers now, you will get through. And don't forget, there is even a board game to win, if you're lucky.
James O'Brien on LBC.
3 minutes after 12 is the time, and you are listening to Mystery Hour with James O'Brien on LBC. I might start saying Mystery Hour like that every time. Mystery Hour! Because it gets in your mind better. It's psychology, this is. Mystery Hour! If you'll hear it now. Every time I say Mystery Hour in your head, you're going to hear Mystery Hour! Anyway, enough nonsense. There is a board game to be won, and it will go to whoever delights me the most. Whichever contribution to this week's Mystery Hour is adjudged by me and me alone. Although I might take some guidance from you on this to be the most enjoyable. That's it, and it's very much in the eye of the beholder. The full terms and conditions are available at lbc.co.uk, and if you want to find out more about the game itself, and remember, Christmas is on the way, and not everybody wants the book. Some people might want the board game. You need to get over to mysteryhour.co.uk to find out how you can get your hands on a copy. Is it a copy? I don't know what the correct word is. Anyway, get your hands on the rather brilliant Mystery Hour board game. 4 minutes after 12. The way it works is this. People ring in with questions, and then other people ring in with answers. It may not sound particularly exciting, but it routinely constitutes the most enjoyable hour of the week that we spend together. Routinely, not always, but it's a fairly reliable bit of fun. I also offer up a guarantee most weeks, or I used to. I stopped for a while. Can't remember why. I offer up a guarantee most weeks that you will have at least one laugh out loud moment in the course of the next 54 or so minutes. And I'm prepared to stand by that pledge today and refund all of your tickets if you do not have a laugh out loud moment in the course of the next 54 or so minutes. The number you need, you know what the number is, but I do give it out because I do want to tempt new people on board. It's hard to get through, but it's not impossible, all right? So 0345 6060973 is the number that you need. And the number remains the same, whether you're ringing in with a question to ask or whether you're ringing in to answer somebody else's question. 5 minutes after 12. Shall we start? I think we should. With Deb in Solihull. Deb, question or answer?
Question.
Carry on.
When does a war become a world war?
Does a war become a world war? I quite like that. I can't believe we've not done it before, but I can't remember the answer. So when does a war... I mean... Would it be when a treaty kicks in? No, can't just be that, can it? When allies have to... So you've got treaties with allies. If they get attacked, you have to join in. So... But then how many countries?
Well, exactly.
Yeah. Was it? Is it even a world war? Even some of the ones we call world wars. Was the First World War really a world war in the continent?
This is what made me think, because I was then thinking, with obviously what's going on, then if other people start getting involved, at what point is it like, right, this isn't just regional anymore, this is world? But in the last World War, not everybody got involved.
Okay, there will actually be, I'm pretty sure that historians will have a sort of criteria for this. There will be a broad academic consensus on when a war becomes a world war. And we will find out what it is for you, Deb.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much. When does a war become a world war? And can it start as a non-world war, but then as it escalates, become a war? Presumably it can. Well, it must. Of course it can. I like that question. Roy's in Honiton. Roy, question or answer?
It's a question, James. Can I just ask you a little side question?
Oh, I don't know. What is it?
Why do you say when you first call a question or answer when there's not been any questions?
Just to establish whether they've got a question or an answer.
What were they answering if you haven't said any... There's no questions before that?
I don't know. I just have to check, though, don't I?
Anyway, so my question is, you know when professional tennis players are just about to serve...
Yes.
And they look at their tennis balls and they discard one or they discard another. What are they looking for?
That's a really good question. It's not just professional tennis players. I do it all the time. I've got no idea what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So, you might think that one is slightly harder than the other, or they've got a bit... There could be suspicion, couldn't there, kicking in?
Yeah.
I got an ace with that one. I'm going to use it again.
But it must come round again because they use those balls all the time until new balls. So they're looking at the same ball. At some point, and then they
jettison one of them. So we need Andrew Castle, don't we, or someone like that. We need a professional tennis player to tell us whether or not there is anything going on there, except because there's a lot of habits. Do you watch a lot of tennis?
Only when it's on professionally, during Wimbledon, that kind of thing.
So Rafa Nadal's pre-serve rituals are extraordinary to watch. He goes through a succession of rituals, and the ball no doubt plays a part in that process as well. But whether or not you're actually making a quality control-based choice of ball, I do not know. It seems unlikely for the reasons you allude to, but we should put it on the board. Tennis balls and world wars. There you go. All human life is here. Thank you, Roy. 8 minutes after 12 is the time. Rob's in Bracknell. Rob, question or answer?
Hello, question.
Carry on.
I was suffering with a bad cold the other week.
I'm very sorry to hear that, Rob.
Yeah, better now.
Were you very brave? Were you a brave little soldier? Or
I was a brave soldier.
Well done.
However, my dog came up by the side of me and stayed with me while I was cold, ill in bed. And my question is, do dogs catch human viruses?
Well, was your dog all right?
She was fine.
So she didn't catch anything off you on this occasion?
No coughing, no sneezing, as I saw.
Isn't it incredible how they know when you're poorly?
Yeah. It's quite comforting.
It is quite comforting. Our cats do as well, especially with my girls. The cat will know when one of them's a bit under the weather and just go and lie with them. I don't know. I don't even know. I can't even begin to start pondering this one. I haven't got a clue. Someone will know. Can pets catch viruses, colds from humans? 0345 6060973. Thank you, Rob. I like that one as well. Karen's in Grantham. Karen, question or answer?
Question, please.
Carry on.
Right. Well, I've just done battle taking my sheets in off the washing line.
Oh,
and
yes.
It's a question I've been thinking about for a bit now, and especially watching the fires on Attenborough. You know, when there was... The question is, how fast is the fastest the wind can blow? Because sometimes you'll say, oh, it's blowing at 50 miles an hour, then we'll get a gale, and it's blowing 100 miles an hour. And is there a limit, is what I suppose I'm trying to say, to how fast the wind can blow? And if there is, can someone explain it to me?
So, I mean, the fastest recorded wind speed, would that be an answer to your question?
Well, if that's the fastest recorded, but could it possibly go any faster?
Well, I can't see that there would be a measurable limit on wind speed. I mean, because it's so many different factors combining. I don't even know why I'm trying to answer this question.
I don't know either.
Well, how windy is it in Grantham at the moment?
Well, it's not too bad. It's windy enough to sort of cause you grief trying to get the sheets in. But
it's very flat, isn't it?
Well, not that flat.
Is it not that flat? It's in Lincolnshire. I always think of Lincolnshire.
Yeah, there's bits of Lincolnshire. The Fens, they're flat.
Very flat. So you get the wind probably gets up more speed on a good old flat plain than it would do with hills and things to break it up.
Yeah. I mean, it's like the hottest temperature, isn't it? Is there an absolute hottest temperature we'll ever reach?
I don't think you're going to get an answer to that bit, but I'll try. I'll put it on the board. You should get an answer to the fastest recorded wind.
The fastest. Oh, how fast is? Or can somebody work out? You know, they do these clever sums to work things out.
Yeah.
Is there something that can work out that the wind can only ever blow this fast?
It can never go faster than that because the temperature can never go higher than this or whatever. I'm not massively optimistic about that bit of this question. But no, I want to be. I want to get you an answer. I'm going to try, but I can't imagine what that calculation would look like, really.
No. Okay.
You're on. Thank you, Karen. Lovely stuff. 12. It's 11 minutes after 12. I struggle with the time when it's consecutive like that. 12, 11, 11, 12. I do 12. It's now 12, 12. That's much easier. You can't get that the wrong way around, can you? It's 12, 12. I'll say it the other way around. Still 12, 12, you see? Absolutely golden. But when it's 11, 12 or 12, 11, I get a bit thrown. Kiri's in Bounds Green. Kiri, question or answer?
It's a question, James.
Carry on.
Right, so everything that we know is contained within the universe.
Right.
And the universe is constantly expanding. But what's it expanding into if everything's contained within the universe?
But who said everything is contained within the universe?
Well, what's what the theory goes with scientists when I've watched documentaries.
Well, that's not a very satisfactory answer to my question, is it?
I'm asking
you talk about the known.
The
so what is the universe expanding into? Darkness.
Yes, if you know.
Darkness.
But then if
nothingness.
Nothingness. Nothingness. I would have thought it's still within the universe.
No, it's without the universe because we're expanding in it. In it.
Then that means it's not in it. In it.
In it. It is in it.
It.
No, it's not in it. It's in. These questions make my teeth itch, man.
Which means it's a good question.
No, it's not a good question. It's not a good question. Well, it is a good question, but the answer, you're thinking of it in terms of three-dimensional physics, and you can't do that with the universe. It's expanding into and also away from itself, you see?
Yeah, I get that, but there has to be something that it expands into.
There doesn't. There doesn't have to be. You're just thinking in the wrong way. It's as if you're speaking a different language. You're thinking in physical terms, but the universe doesn't obey the parameters in which you're thinking. It doesn't expand into anything or come from any. It just expands.
It just
does.
There has to be a better answer than that.
It does not.
You would say that.
My answer is expanding from itself and into itself.
I mean, that's a good answer. I must admit that's quite a good answer. But
all right, you're on.
I'm not convinced.
What does the universe expand into? The answer is nothing. You just don't like my explanation because I'm not an academic. The answer is nothing.
If you get Brian Coxon that says that, then I'd say yes. But I mean,
I've got to send him a book. Actually, you've just reminded me. Thank you for that. All right. What is the universe expanding? We agree that the universe is expanding.
Yes.
Therefore, the question of what is it expanding into seems like a sensible question. So we'll ask it.
Okay, great.
Carry on. 0345 6060973 is the number that you need. Cam is in Nuneaton. Cam, question or answer?
Answer. And
Carry
it's to... hello?
Hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
No.
It's an answer to a question.
Go on, which
regarding
one?
basically transmitting...
Pets and colds.
Yeah, that's the one. Basically, the term is zoonosis, I believe.
Come off it. Zoonosis?
Yeah, and
sensational.
It's like diseases and certain conditions can be transmitted from dogs to humans. I only know that is because my nan was an infection control nurse, and she basically used to tell me, like, don't get too close to the dog, licking your face and stuff like that, because they can give you conditions and you can give them if they're not too well.
Well.
Yeah.
So it cuts both ways then. Zoonosis can be either animal to human or human to animal.
That's the one, yeah. But it's only certain conditions, I believe, certain diseases. It's not...
like what?
everything.
Do we have any ideas? Well, rabies.
Not off the top of my head.
Rabies.
Well, yeah, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. You used to see the signs at the ferry terminal telling you not to, bring a dog back from France because it might have rabies. It could give rabies to a human. Can a human give rabies to a dog?
Potentially.
There's a question. There's a question for Christmas dinner, Cam.
Tested enough, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
and you've even come up with a word for it. Well, you didn't come up with it.
It's not come up with that. I won't take the grant for that one. But,
zoonoses, not nosis, noses, as in noses.
Apologies.
Zoonoses.
Dyslexic.
No, I'm just checking. I think it is zoonoses. Zoonosis.
I remember, yeah.
Zoonosis.
Yeah, my nan used to say it anyway.
Qualifications? Got a clever nan.
got a clever nan. I'm doing a undergraduate degree, so yeah.
There it goes. Round of applause for Cam.
Thank you.
Well, you live and learn. Zoonosis. You won't forget that word either. Zoonoses. So you can remember it. You can have an aide memoir. So, I caught a disease off an animal. What happened? A zebra wiped its nose on me, and I caught a disease. And then you remember, zoonoses. Zoonoses. It's called zoonoses. Matt's in Finchley. Matt, question or answer?
It's an answer for you, James.
Carry on.
It's an answer to the tennis ball question.
Nice.
It's, to be honest, it's quite a simple one.
Yeah, all right, mate. Mate, we're all friends. We're only having it's just a bit of fun. Right? Go on.
So what they're looking for when they are about to serve is they tend to look for the ball which is the freshest. So it's the one which is the least fluffed up.
The least fluffy, because that will have the greatest wind resistance.
Yeah, it flies faster through the air.
The less fluffy it is,
quicker. And then, for the second serve, though, they're probably going to look for a more fluffy ball.
Because they're going to put some spin on it.
Exactly, yeah.
And other things might play a part as well, but basically it's going to be fluffiness.
Yeah, so the other things that will play a part, actually,
you don't want dirty
the guy
balls.
That asked the guy that asked the question was right when he talked about superstition.
Yes.
So if you do hit an ace or you win a certain point with a ball, I will tend to possibly go and get that myself. I don't have ball boys delivered to me, but yeah,
there it is.
Will also request
Qualifications?
I play tennis quite a lot.
Nice one. Round of applause. Makes sense. You're right. It is obvious when it's explained, but it still needed to be explained. It can be zoonosis or zoonoses. It's singular or plural. Thank you. 18 minutes after 12 is the time. We better do this, hadn't we?
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
21 minutes after 12 is the time. What is the universe expanding into? We've done the pets and colds. What is the definition of a world war? At what point does a war become a world war? What's the fastest wind can travel? Is there a limit on it? We've done the tennis balls. We've done the pets and the toads going, no, I like this. Coming along. Matt's in Worthing. Matt, question or answer?
Hello, James. It's a question, please.
Carry on.
So, you just reminded me, when you did the time thing and you said 12:12,
yeah.
I'm in a little WhatsApp group with my wife and my niece, so every time we see the time like that, which is quite often, we have to quickly text it.
I like it.
And in the WhatsApp group...
I just looked up then, and it was 12:22:22, because I've got seconds on my clock as well.
It happens a lot.
Well, of course it does.
Online. It's numbers.
It sure does.
So,
go on.
So, anyway, when we do that, and so you say it's like 0707, then you put a little GIF on to do with 7, and you have to sort of change it every time.
Okay, yeah, got it.
But the little GIFs don't ever have sound. It's just a moving image. I just wondered, why is there no sound?
On GIFs? On all GIFs?
On all GIFs. There's no GIFs with sound. It's just like soundless, which I find a bit strange. You'd think they would have sound. So I think we need to speak to a geek
Speak to a geek. That could be another feature, couldn't it? Speak to a geek
week.
Speak to a geek week. Yeah, all right. I mean, what? I suppose because they appear on your phone, but you could still have sound in the background, couldn't you?
Yeah, you would have thought that sound would add something to the
Okay, yeah, well, I
world.
guess I've never even thought about this before. I have once or twice, actually, because sometimes you send one and you think, oh, that really should have sound.
Yeah, I only thought it this morning because I was sending one. It was 707, so I sent an image of 7 from Star Trek.
Oh, well done.
Which is geeky as well.
It is very geeky. Speak to the Geek Week. Okay, why don't GIFs have any, whatchamacallits? Sound on them. Yeah, I like it. Cheers, man. Thank you.
Cheers, James.
Take care, Matt. Stay safe. Richie's in Colchester. Richie, question or answer?
It's a question, James.
Carry on.
Why is it that my wife's snoring wakes me up, but my own snoring doesn't wake me up?
Okay. Does it ever wake you up?
Well, obviously my wife doesn't snore.
No.
The lady wouldn't.
No,
But, it wakes me up all the time. I was thinking about it at 2 o'clock this morning, and I thought, I'm going to phone James O'Brien.
See, he'll know the answer. I don't know the answer to this. You can wake yourself up sometimes snoring, but it's not as abrupt, is it? You just sort of half notice that you're snoring in your sleep, and then you sort of stir. But your wife could be snoring less loudly than you are, and it will be her that wakes you up, not you.
Correct. Exactly right.
Why would that be?
Maybe she irritates me more than I realise.
Maybe. It could be. I mean, I don't want to be brutal about it, but, you know, in the way that some people are fond of the aromas of their own flatulence, there could be a sort of, there could be a tonal note that is less jarring to you because the noise it's making in your head is different from the noise that you're hearing your wife. I'll find out for you. I'm probably not going to bring flatulence into it.
Yeah, that went downhill quite quickly.
Well, it was unnecessary. What's going on in the background?
Oh, that's a delivery guy, a mobile calf.
Oh, okay. It's all going on in Colchester, Richie.
Oh, mate, all the time.
25 minutes after 12. Why does Richie's wife, theoretically, if she did snore, why would that wake Richie up, whereas his own bison-like trumpeting, I said I wasn't going to bring flatulence, his own bison-like trumpeting, he can sleep through absolutely regardless. 25 after 12 is the time. Dave's in Uxbridge. Dave, question or answer?
All right, James. Got an answer for the wind speeds.
Oh, aye.
The wind speed on Earth, theoretically, is limited to the rotation of the planet because it's movement of the atmosphere relative to the ground speed.
Okay.
So the fastest that the planet rotates is at the equator, where it's effectively 1 minute of longitude is equivalent to 1 nautical mile. So you're looking at 900 nautical miles per hour. It's about 1,000 miles an hour. Okay, but that's if you didn't have the resistance of the atmosphere that we've got. So you're looking at wind pushing against wind, which we would notice as human beings, but at the end of the day, it's still matter, it's still material in the atmosphere. It's elements of oxygen and nitrogen and stuff. So theoretically on Earth, you're looking at about 900 nautical miles per hour as the theoretical maximum. I think the fastest they've recorded it is about 500 miles an hour in some big category hurricanes.
Right, around 500, but it could go up to about 9, you reckon? In laboratory conditions, as it were.
Well, yeah, theoretically, because you're measuring it relative to the ground speed. And the Earth rotates at 900 nautical miles per hour at the equator at the maximum. However, there are winds that move much, much faster, solar winds, which they're theorising about with interplanetary travel using solar sails, to harness solar winds and move ships up to 1 million miles an hour.
Shut up.
No, serious.
Serious?
Seriously.
Qualifications?
I did meteorology when I was doing my navigation qualifications in the Navy, and part of that was that we had to work out true courses relative to wind speed, because obviously the sea moves one direction, but if you're using sails, it's going to push you in a different direction. So,
yeah, I mean, I'm going to level with you, Dave. You're going to get a round of applause, so don't worry about that. You kind of lost me about 8 words in.
All you got to remember is the Earth is 360 degrees round, and there's 60 minutes in each degree.
Yeah.
And at the equator,
he's gone again.
At the equator, 1 minute is a nautical mile.
Oh, No idea. Absolutely no idea. So, hang on a minute. In relation to Karen's question...
Is there a theoretical maximum?
Yeah.
900 nautical miles per hour.
And the highest recorded that we're aware of is about 500 on Earth.
Yeah.
You've given a chapter and verse, mate.
And again, if someone's going to be around at 500 miles per hour, they've got to be pretty well protected.
You wouldn't put your sheets out in that, would you?
I might put something that generates some green energy. Would be good.
Well, that's not a bad idea. Oh, you covered a lot of ground there, Dave. Have another round of applause on me. Lovely stuff. Some debate over whether it's a GIF or a GIF. What do you say? GIF. Everyone says GIF, but the geeks are saying GIF. What do you say, Adam? GIF. 3 GIFs. It's like gold, frankincense. No, it doesn't work. Helen's in Bowness. Helen, question or answer?
It's an answer.
Carry on.
It's about the GIFs or GIFs or whatever you want to call them.
What do you say?
Well, I say GIFs,
Right.
but I have a feeling that GIF might be the technically correct
Yeah, I
term.
do too, looking at it.
Yeah, but I think it's just accepted that we call it a GIF.
Why are they soundless?
Well, so a GIF is actually, even though it looks like a video, it's actually images. So it's just a video broken down into its individual frames. So, and because it's an image, obviously images don't have sound.
Okay. Yeah, like when you flick a page, when you do...
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. So it looks like a video, but it's really not. So if you were to actually open up that file in, well, I mean, I use Photoshop. I'm a designer. So if I was to open that up, it would actually be broken down into its individual images.
So it wouldn't have sound. So it probably goes back to the origins of it and the fact that it's quite an old technology that has somehow survived.
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, it was just because obviously it's a lot, because the way that we share GIFs tends to be kind of online, like socially, as we're talking about through messaging services. So the file size wants to be smaller.
Yeah.
And so
it doesn't really need to be now
file.
because of the stuff we're carrying around has such processing power. But when they started out, then it would have been keeping it down.
Yeah. And they used to be a lot more basic than they are now as well.
That's there it is.
You know, you wouldn't necessarily get them looking so much like a video as you do now, where the frame rate is you've actually got every single frame, so it does
Beautiful
look like
answer.
a video.
Qualifications?
Graphic designer.
That'll do nicely. Lovely work, Helen.
Thank you.
And also very swiftly done as well. Matt got an answer there almost before he'd finished asking the question. It's 12:30. A couple of phone lines free. Room for some more questions. Amelia Cox has the headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
12:34 is the time, and Mystery Hour is well underway. World War. When does a war become a world war? We've done the wind. What is the universe expanding into? And we've done the gifts or the GIFs. There's some dispute, and I'm not getting involved, all right? I'm staying out of this one. Someone has said that the person who invented GIFs said that you pronounce the G as in giraffe, in which case they become GIFs, and somebody else has pointed out that it actually stands for graphic something or other, and therefore it would be a hard G. It stands for Graphics Interchange Format. Does that sound plausible? That sounds like something you'd make up if you were trying to sound technical. So, it's a graphics interchange format. You don't want to be messing with the graphics interchange. You don't want to be messing with the graphics interchange format. So in which case it would be a hard G. And they came in the space. So actually, that's quite funny because one person called Doodle Whale and another person called Wimble Womble. Such is the nature of Twitter handles. Doodle Whale says the creator of the GIF said that it is pronounced with a G as in giraffe, ergo GIF. And Wimble Womble said GIF stands for Graphics Interchange Format, so the G of GIF is hard, as in GIF. So never the twain shall meet. Nick's in Congleton. Nick, question or answer?
Answer, James.
Carry on.
What is the universe expanding into?
That's a question.
Sorry, yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry, no, it's okay.
I'm such a child. Carry on.
It creates space as it goes. It was infinitesimally small at the Big Bang 14 billion years ago. All the matter that was created then is still around now. It's thermodynamics. It becomes less available to do work. But it creates space as it goes. It's like a balloon. If you put little spots on a balloon and blow it up, it's still in itself, if you see what I mean. Although I know you say, what's the potentiality outside the universe? But it actually creates a space. It's just the distances between the galaxies expands. So the universe is expanding into itself. There's nothing outside it.
It's a brilliant answer. What are your qualifications?
I've got an astronomy degree.
Really?
Yeah, a long time ago.
No, yeah, but still, it's still everything's still in the same place. Well, actually, no, that's probably not true in the case.
No,
of astronomy.
but I keep in touch with, and Brian Cox is a bit of a hero as well.
I think he said something once, didn't he? Like the universe has no responsibility to explain itself to the likes of us, or something like that.
Yeah, no obligation.
No obligation. That was it. It was a lovely line. And you're obviously right, but I think that it was Kiri who asked the question. That the concept. This is why I talked about it being almost a different language. The concept of something expanding into nothing is impossible to grasp in a sense.
It is, yeah, and there may be it may be a multiverse. There may be other universes that will never come in contact because they actually expand faster than the speed of light. Which think, how can anything, because that's the speed limit of the universe. But space itself can travel faster than the speed of light, so the distance between the universes may be expanding beyond the speed of light.
Yes.
It all came from something called eternal inflation. A man called Alan Guth in 1982 thought that where, because of the so-called flatness of the universe, we can't see the curvature, so it appears infinite to us. Which it may well be, if that makes sense, but it's still expanding.
Yes. Well, it sort of makes sense. I mean, it clearly makes sense, as in from your end of the telescope, if you pardon the pun. But I'm not going to lie to you. I'm struggling to keep up, Nick. But I'm supremely confident that you're correct.
Thanks, Jay.
No, thank you. Have a round of applause.
Oh, thank you.
It's a good one this week. There's all sorts going on. So we've only got Richie's snoring left and Deb's World Wars. So we've got time for some more. Thank you, Nick. Jane's in Woking. Jane, question or answer?
Hi, James. It's a question, please.
Carry on.
So when I sleep on the right-hand side, so my right-hand side of my brain is on the pillow, I wake up and I remember my dreams and I feel all the feelings I felt during my dream. But when I sleep on the left-hand side of my brain, I wake up and I don't remember anything and I don't feel anything from my sleep. Why is that?
Come off it.
It's true.
Really?
Yeah.
How long have you been tracking this?
Well, a few years now, and I actually now make sure I sleep on the left-hand side of my brain because a lot of the dreams from my right side, I don't really want to wake up and remember. So I consciously now only sleep on the left-hand side.
What? So do you have nightmares then?
No, just normally. Do you know what it is? It's normally about ex-partners, which is weird.
Really?
And then I wake up and
naughty dream.
No, just like I've spent like the night when we've gone out for dinner or something in some weird, situation, and I wake up and I'm like, oh, I really missed that person. That was really nice, and I remember it was just a dream.
Oh.
And then.
So you don't want those?
So now I'm
you wake up all discombobulated.
Yeah, so now I'm like, no, do you know what? I don't want to wake up
sleep on my left-hand side.
So I'm going to sleep on my left and I'll wake up and everything's fine.
And you won't remember any dreams at all?
No, I don't feel anything. I don't wake up with any dream memories, nothing. But on the right side, just no.
I'm just going to consult my colleagues. Does this sound, have you ever come across this before? No? Have you? No, I've never heard of it either. Well, I know. I mean, you could be a freak of nature.
Well, it's been said before, but but I thought maybe it had something to do with, I don't know, the one half of the brain. Because I know the brain's in two halves. Maybe it had something to do with the weight of one half being on top of the other, or I don't know. Some very clever person who knows the brain, I'm sure, will hopefully call in and explain.
You're more optimistic than I am. I think this is bonkers. If I sleep on the right side, I dream. If I sleep on the left, I don't. And I don't want to remember my dreams because they're poignant.
Yeah.
Therefore, I now sleep on the left all the time. And so you're probably still dreaming. You just don't remember your dreams.
Yeah, and I don't wake up with those sort of feelings of angst or lonely or longing or missing some. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
of course I do.
I avoid them by doing that.
Well, you're on. I mean, this is interesting, isn't it? I mean, what if it's just you?
Well,
probably be we have to sell you to science. It could be a scientific.
Someone's gonna Someone's going to ask for my phone number and say, we need to test this girl.
We need to test her. We need her brain. She could be you could be the missing link. You could be the solution to some deep human mystery. You could be like that film, that new Nicolas Cage film, when they get inside people's dreams. You could be the Nicolas Cage character that allows the technology to be developed. Anyway, it's 12:42. Vaughan's in Crowborough. Vaughan, question or answer?
Question, please, James.
Carry on.
When someone donates an organ, or I receive a donated organ, what happens to the DNA of that organ once it's in my body?
Yeah, I think, it's a good question. So if you take my liver, I wouldn't. But if you took my liver, I'd get a fresh one if you could. You wouldn't want mine.
Can that be better than mine?
You wouldn't want mine. And then they took a sample of tissue from the liver in you after it had been there. Would it DNA match me or you?
Exactly. If you said I was a murder victim and all that was left, hypothetically speaking, was my liver.
Oh, blimey, this has taken a turn. This has taken a turn, Vaughan, hasn't it?
My imagination's running wild there.
Okay, you're on. Yeah, I like it. I think we've done something similar in the past, but I can't remember it. So DNA and organs, does it change when you have an organ transplant? Blood as well, I suppose. If you have a blood transfusion, would the DNA in the blood be your DNA or the donor's DNA? And how long? Oh, crikey. Thank you, Vaughan. So we've got Jane's dreams and Vaughan's out of control imagination. What if Jane had a dream about Vaughan's liver? It's 12:43. Paul's in Tiverton. Paul, question or answer?
Good afternoon, James.
Hello, Paul.
It's a question.
Carry on.
Why are there 2 tides a day when the Earth only rotates once a day? In other words, the Earth rotates once a day, so we have a 24-hour clock.
Yeah.
But you'll have a high tide at, say, 12 o'clock midnight, and roughly 12 o'clock midday, a little bit past.
Well, because think of an egg timer.
An egg timer?
Yeah, an egg timer.
I'm thinking of an egg timer.
Okay. Now rotate it. Now rotate it once. 360 degrees, not 180. Have you done it?
Sorry, I've rotated it 360 degrees?
Yeah. Slowly.
Okay, so
slowly,
it's the same way up it was before.
So you can see, but what did the sand do? Did it make one journey or did it make 2 journeys?
I've no idea how this is relevant to the question. I can't.
How dare you?
Picture it.
Well, here is the egg timer. It currently has all of the sand in the bottom of the egg timer. Okay?
Right.
And I'm going to start turning it, and it is going. So, and when I use the words bottom and top, I'm referring to where the 2 chambers were at the beginning of this very complicated and sophisticated experiment. All right?
Okay.
So all the sand is in the bottom, and the top is empty. I'm turning the egg timer. I'm slowly turning the egg timer. So it's just reaching 90 degrees. It's just gone past. So now it's going bottom to top, 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 bottom to top. I'm turning it round. It's reaching 3 o'clock. It's getting to top to bottom, 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 top. You see?
Right.
So there it's gone in 2 different directions. There have been 2 tides.
But what's that got to do with tides and gravity? I don't really...
Well, because the world is turning. As it goes one way, all the water rushes to the bottom, and then as it turns back round again, all the water rushes to the top again.
Yeah. Can I give another way of explaining what my dilemma? Because I've heard people try to explain this. I've never understood.
You've never heard them do it as well as I just did, have you?
Yeah. Can I explain? So, the way I see it is that it's gravity. I understand the moon. If the moon is above you, then the gravitational pull of the Earth is a bit less because you're being pulled to some extent to the moon.
Yeah.
So I can understand that the water's a bit lighter, so it'll hump up below the moon because it'll be pulled slightly towards the moon.
Yeah.
But what happens in fact is that it also humps up on the opposite side of the Earth, opposite the moon.
Yeah.
At the same time. And that is the fact, and that's what happens. But what I don't understand why.
Yeah.
I've been pondering over for years.
I think you're suggesting that my egg timer explanation has been suboptimal.
Well,
in helpfulness.
I'm not making a judgment about that. I didn't understand how that related to the...
Yeah, it's because it's physics. It's very complicated to understand. Very complicated.
Egg timeonomics.
Why are there 2 tides a day if the Earth only rotates once, is the question.
Yes.
Well, I will put it on the board, but if the answer doesn't involve egg timers, I'll eat my hat.
Okay.
It's 12:46. Thank you, Paul.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
10-1 is the time, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where Miss JR continues. So we still don't know the World War question, which I think is quite straightforward. I'm sure we've done it before. There's a round of applause waiting there for the taking. When does a war become a world war? Why does Richie's snoring not wake him up, but his wife's snoring does? Why does Jane remember her dreams when she sleeps on one side of her head, but not when she sleeps on the other? DNA. If I gave Vaughan my kidneys and then I was brutally murdered and only my kidneys remained, whose DNA would be detected from those kidneys, mine or Vaughan's? And why do we have 2 tides when the world only rotates once? Egg timers. Ash is in Northampton, which means the tide question, because Ash is... what exactly are you, Ash? Do you train captains?
Yeah, so I'm an ex-Merchant Navy Chief Officer, and I train...
your phone line's gone. Hang on, it got better again then. So say all that again.
So I'm an ex-Merchant Navy Chief Officer.
Whoa, phone line. This is what happens. I wonder if there's something weird going, because I met actually in person last month in Northampton on my book tour, and now I've met him. The phone line's gone funny. Jane's Inc. It's like the other Jane's dreams. Jane's Inc. Maybe if I put my headphone on my other ear, Ash would come through clearly. Jane's in Cambridge. Jane, question or answer?
It's a question. I think it's easier than some of the others. Why doesn't granulated sugar have a best before date?
Why doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, icing sugar does. Everything else does.
Caking.
Granulated sugar doesn't.
Caking.
What?
Caking. You can't granulated sugar. If it cakes a bit, you can just give it a crumble.
Why hasn't there got a date on the packet?
Because it doesn't ever go out of date.
But lots of things that wouldn't go out of date have dates on them.
For example?
Icing sugar?
No, caking. Also, it might get wet.
And you can't use it?
Are we sure that icing sugar has a best before date on it?
Yep.
Okay, all right. Well, that's a bit of a spanner in the works, isn't it? Because you could say sugar doesn't go off; it does not spoil.
Well, lots of things that you would think
I know
didn't
that,
spoil.
yeah, but they can spoil in different ways, can't they? So water in a plastic bottle can spoil because somehow some of the plastic particles get into the water and it ends up tasting a bit plasticky. So, or heat, but sugar and honey doesn't spoil because they found it in the pyramids. But so sugar doesn't spoil, but then icing sugar.
Honey has a date on it. Honey has a date on it, and syrup has a date on it.
Because they come in plastic bottles or glass bottles, you see, but not paper. Paper doesn't transmit particles to what.
But you think that flour is going to spoil more than sugar?
Yes.
Because?
Bacteria.
That sugar doesn't have?
Correct.
Really?
Yep.
Okay.
What, are you struggling with it, Jane? That's a great question. Why does sugar not have a best before date? Well, granulated sugar doesn't, but icing sugar does. That's the killer part of it. No, you're welcome. I've wasted so much time messing around. We probably won't get an answer now, but I've enjoyed it. I hope you have. Oh, take care, Jane. Ash is in. Back to Ash on the tides. So the trainer of Merchant Navy sea captains.
Yes, and the rest of the Merchant Navy as well.
So phone line's still awful. I'm going to have to fight. I'm going to have to sack someone now. Seriously, you're fired. Go on, hop it. You're out. Get him back. I like Ash. And it's going to be a great answer to the tide question, almost certainly involving egg timers. 12:54. So we need an answer to Paul's question about tides. We need an answer to Jane's question about sugar. We need an answer to Vaughan's question about DNA. The other Jane's question about dreaming. Richie's question about snoring. And Deb's question about world wars. Adam's in Boreham Wood. Oh, no, you're pushing Ash off the board. Adam, question or answer?
I feel guilty now. It's an answer.
Carry on. It's not your fault. Your phone line is good and his was not. Carry on.
My answer might be wrong now. You've got me worried.
Go on.
So the tide.
Yes.
The moon pulls on the water surface covering the Earth closest to the moon, giving you a high tide on that side. It then pulls the Earth very slightly also towards it, and it pulls less on the water on the far side of the Earth. So you get an elongation, you get greater build-up of water on two sides, and as you rotate in one day, you get two high tides as you come across each of them.
Because so like the egg timer.
I had no idea what the egg timer was about, but
what? How can you say that?
Because it's not, the egg timer is like the water's fallen down and then come back. It's not like that. At all points, there's water. Okay, fine.
What?
Your analogy doesn't work for me. I'm sorry.
That's all right. Quite a lot of people have made that point, Adam. But some of them a bit more politely than you. I'm not going to lie.
Sorry.
That's
sorry,
all right. That's okay. I know what you scientists are like. You're quite dismissive of less educated people. Qualifications? Degree in physics.
Degree in physics, but I actually learnt that at GCSE.
Yeah, all right, mate. All right. Yeah, cheers, thanks, bye. Round of applause for Adam. Ian's in Torquay. Question or answer?
It's an answer.
Carry on.
So it's to do with sugar, and basically things like sugar doesn't go off, and also salt will be another one, because there's no water in it. So it's to do with basically osmotic pressure and basically a lack of water, so it won't microbiome.
But why is there a best before date on her icing sugar, but not on her granulated sugar?
I think that's what you said. I think that's to do with sort of caking.
I made that up.
Well, did you? Okay.
Yeah,
well, in that case, I didn't. I don't know if there is a date. It will.
Is there anything
sugar.
Mixed into icing sugar, like a bit of corn flour or something? No.
I haven't got any icing sugar on me, so I can't tell you. But granulated sugar is just sugar. Things like salt as well is exactly the same principle. It's to do with just not basically having any water. Life needs water to grow.
Yeah.
Hang
on a minute. Whoa. Alert the news desk. Esther in Bournemouth has got a best before date on her icing sugar. She doesn't have a best before date on her icing sugar.
Okay, I can't give you an answer for that one. I just
nearly swore then. What are your qualifications?
Well, only that I'm a chocolatier and I work with sugar all the time and cream and other things. I'm artisan chocolatier.
Oh, cool beans. You've got a speciality?
I suppose our truffles, champagne truffles.
Yeah, what's the name of your company? You don't have to tell me. You can.
No, I'd be delighted to. It's called Lloyd and James Chocolate in Torquay.
Lloyd and James in Torquay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ian. Take care.
Thank you.
Good luck with the chocolatiering. Carl's in Derby. Carl, question. A round of applause. Carl, question or answer?
Answer.
Quickly.
DNA doesn't change with a transplant.
So if I gave Vaughan my kidneys, and then he was brutally murdered, and all that remained were his kidneys, the DNA test would be me.
Yeah, well, your immune suppressant medication, the body still accepts it as a foreign object, so it doesn't change your own DNA.
Well,
that's why you don't need immune medication.
Qualifications?
Kidney transplant patient, and I am a mental health nurse, not a proper nurse. So I do read these things up.
That is a perfect. I mean, you're not going to get a better qualification. The qualifications I've got a kidney transplant.
Yeah.
Is that a Ray Liotta? Have you got a Ray Liotta there? Yeah, let's have a Ray Liotta.
I'm Ray Liotta, and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC.
You can't be better qualified than that, can you?
If you build it,
they will come.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a round of applause as well while you're here. Well, I wonder if that's ever happened in a sort of crime scenario. Well, you'd have to hope not. Oh, Lord, who am I going to give the board game to now on this week? Any thoughts? Because we could get some answers. No, Carl got a Ray Liotta. I can't give I always feel that it's not fair to give out both the Ray Liotta and the... Or is it? I don't know. Vaughan was quite good, wasn't he, on the DNA, on the question. Dave on the wind. Dave on the wind was brilliant. Windy Dave in Uxbridge, I think, this week. That's it from me for another day. Do you know, quickly, because I do this spiel about the Global Player every day, but the number of people that have started listening to the Whole Show podcast later in the day, It's quite extraordinary. So it's obviously, reaching parts that other content providers cannot reach, the global player. So you can listen to all of our shows, mine, Sheila's, everybody's, the whole show podcast, whenever you want. So you could listen to that when one of the presenters you don't like is on. So I don't know who you don't like, but when they're on, you could listen to Sheila Fogarty's. If you don't like me, you could listen to Sheila Fogarty's show from yesterday.
Of course.
And then get ready for today. So pause, you can rewind it, live radio. You're always in control. Download it for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it's Tom Swarbrick, but now it's time for Sheila Fogarty.
Live and happening.
Absolutely.
Thanks, James.
You're always in control.
Always in control.
James O'Brien on LBC.